Even after sorrow, there can be peace.
Hello everyone, welcome to What If Tomioka Giyuu made harem with Kochou Sisters Movie. Before we start, please go support Lgabo9778 for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken characters' gender, but of course Giyuu is a male. The Kochou sisters are two very close sisters, both were pillars of the Demon Slayer Corps. They weren't interested in men at the moment until a new water pillar named Giyuu Tomioka arrived. At first, they weren't interested in him, but they became curious and soon realized they had fallen in love with him. Chapter 1. Shinobu Kochou and Kani Kochou were the two caretakers of the butterfly estate. Both were skilled hunters, so much so that they became pillars. Kani became the flower pillar and Shinobu the insect pillar. They weren't interested in men, always thinking that relationships were unimportant since they had never experienced feelings for a man. But that idea changed when Giyuu Tomioka, the new water pillar, arrived. He was always quiet and reserved, never speaking to anyone except when necessary, and that intrigued both sisters. When they had a mission with him, they tried to get him to talk a little, but they didn't get anywhere. He simply ignored them. Even when he ignored them, they tried everything to get him to talk, and the only time he spoke to them was because of a joke Shinobu made to him, telling him that everyone hated him for not talking and being distant, and they were surprised by his response. Shinobu. Nina Tomioka-san, why aren't you talking? Tomioka. He just kept walking. Annie. Come on, Tomioka-san, talk a little please, she said, sounding tired since she had almost no more resources left to speak. Tomioka. He ignored her and continued walking. Shinobu. It seems you won't talk, if you keep this up everyone will hate you, she said, already tired of trying to make him talk, but to the surprise of both sisters, they heard a voice say. Tomioka. Nobody hates me, he said somewhat angrily and continued walking to lose sight of them a little. Both sisters were surprised, not by the answer, but that finally, after so many attempts, Giyuu Tomioka had spoken to them. His voice was very serious and expressionless. They stood there, watching the water pillar walk away. Shinobu. Did you hear that, Ni-san? She said, somewhat surprised. Annie. Why yes, she said, equally surprised. Both sisters, having recovered from their shock, decided to go with him. They followed Giyuu without saying anything, still processing what Giyuu had said. They wouldn't deny that it was somewhat harsh with that tone, but they were happy to have achieved their victory. The three arrived at the hunters' headquarters to give their report. When they gave it, Giyuu went straight to his estate. The sisters did the same. When they arrived at their estate, they decided to go to their rooms to rest since it was night. But when they entered their rooms, they put a pillow over their face and screamed with excitement. Finally, after so long, they had managed to get him to talk. They were both going to sleep, but not far away they heard a kind of instrument being played. Out of curiosity, they decided to go see what it was. They walked together since they met on the path. They both noticed that the noise was coming from the forest and were prepared in case it was a demon, but their surprise came when they saw Tomioka in a field with a cherry tree and a large calm lake. Shinobu. Ni-san, that's not Tomioka-san. Annie. Yes, it is, but what will it do here? She said hesitantly. They were both about to leave, but they noticed that he had a lyre in his hands and they heard him begin to play the instrument. When he finished playing the instrument, he prepared to leave while hiding the lyre in his haori. Well, the sisters were amazed to hear such a melody, but they noticed that in the lyrics, there was a touch of sadness, both of them did not know why, but inside them, a small feeling began to grow for Giyuu. The next morning the boss called all the pillars together to talk about a matter. Boss. It's good that my children are here. Tsunemi. What's wrong, Oyakata-sama? Boss. I asked you to gather because I'm going to give you a month's break since we've been informed that the demons are less active. Everyone was happy to hear that. Kani and Shinobu were also excited, but they saw that Giyuu was still the same without any expression. This surprised them a little, but they would see that later, so the meeting ended. Giyuu was going to his estate to rest until Shinobu got in his way. Shinobu. Hey Tomioka-san, why aren't you excited about our vacation? Tomioka. He simply ignored her and tried to leave, but Shinobu stood in his way. Shinobu. Ara Tomioka-san, you're ignoring me, she said with a vein throbbing in her head. Tomioka. He ignored her again and with a quick movement passed her and was going to his farm. Annie. What if you try insulting him again? She said, remembering how he responded to her last time. Shinobu. Okay Ni-san. Once again Shinobu stepped in Tomioka's way and with a victorious smile began to speak. Shinobu. Tomioka-san, if you keep this up everyone will hate you. Tomioka. Nobody hates me, he said angrily while frowning. Both sisters were surprised again, but a little less so. However, when they saw that Tomioka responded when they insulted him in that way, they realized they could have a little conversation with him if they made that move. Shinobu. Then why aren't you answering me? Tomioka. I'm not obligated to do that, he said seriously and left. Shinobu. Did you notice, Ni-san? Annie? Yes, it seems we can make him talk if you insult him. So both sisters went to their farm with a note on their heads to make Tomioka talk. They didn't know why, but they desperately wanted to be with Tomioka. During the time they tried to make him talk, they felt a little attraction because they didn't deny he was kind of handsome, but that attraction increased when he spoke and played the lyre. Chapter 2. Shinobu Kochou and Kani Kochou were the two caretakers of the butterfly estate. Both were skilled hunters, so much so that they became pillars. Kani became the flower pillar and Shinobu the insect pillar. They weren't interested in men, always thinking that relationships were unimportant since they had never experienced feelings for a man. But that idea changed when Giyuu Tomioka, the new water pillar, arrived. He was always quiet and reserved, never speaking to anyone except when necessary, and that intrigued both sisters. When they had a mission with him, they tried to get him to talk a little, but they didn't get anywhere. He simply ignored them. Even when he ignored them, they tried everything to get him to talk, and the only time he spoke to them was because of a joke Shinobu made to him, telling him that everyone hated him for not talking and being distant, and they were surprised by his response. Shinobu. Nina Tomioka-san, why aren't you talking? Tomioka. He just kept walking. Annie. Come on, Tomioka-san, talk a little please, she said, sounding tired since she had almost no more resources left to speak. Tomioka. He ignored her and continued walking. Shinobu. It seems you won't talk, if you keep this up everyone will hate you, she said, already tired of trying to make him talk, but to the surprise of both sisters, they heard a voice say. Tomioka. Nobody hates me, he said somewhat angrily and continued walking to lose sight of them a little. Both sisters were surprised, not by the answer, but that finally, after so many attempts, Giyuu Tomioka had spoken to them. His voice was very serious and expressionless. They stood there, watching the water pillar walk away. Shinobu. Did you hear that, Ni-san? She said, somewhat surprised. Annie. Why yes, she said, equally surprised. Both sisters, having recovered from their shock, decided to go with him. They followed Giyuu without saying anything, still processing what Giyuu had said. They wouldn't deny that it was somewhat harsh with that tone, but they were happy to have achieved their victory. The three arrived at the hunters' headquarters to give their report. When they gave it, Giyuu went straight to his estate. The sisters did the same. When they arrived at their estate, they decided to go to their rooms to rest since it was night. But when they entered their rooms, they put a pillow over their face and screamed with excitement. Finally, after so long, they had managed to get him to talk. They were both going to sleep, but not far away they heard a kind of instrument being played. Out of curiosity, they decided to go see what it was. They walked together since they met on the path. They both noticed that the noise was coming from the forest and were prepared in case it was a demon, but their surprise came when they saw Tomioka in a field with a cherry tree and a large calm lake. Shinobu. Ni-san, that's not Tomioka-san. Annie. Yes, it is, but what will it do here? She said hesitantly. They were both about to leave, but they noticed that he had a lyre in his hands and they heard him begin to play the instrument. When he finished playing the instrument, he prepared to leave while hiding the lyre in his haori. Well, the sisters were amazed to hear such a melody, but they noticed that in the lyrics, there was a touch of sadness. Both of them did not know why, but inside them, a small feeling began to grow for Giyuu. The next morning the boss called all the pillars together to talk about a matter. Boss. It's good that my children are here. Tsunemi. What's wrong, Oyakata-sama? Boss. I asked you to gather because I'm going to give you a month's break since we've been informed that the demons are less active. Everyone was happy to hear that. Kani and Shinobu were also excited, but they saw that Giyuu was still the same without any expression. This surprised them a little, but they would see that later, so the meeting ended. Giyuu was going to his estate to rest until Shinobu got in his way. Shinobu. Hey Tomioka-san, why aren't you excited about our vacation? Tomioka. He simply ignored her and tried to leave, but Shinobu stood in his way. Shinobu. Ara Tomioka-san, you're ignoring me, she said with a vein throbbing in her head. Tomioka. He ignored her again and with a quick movement passed her and was going to his farm. Annie. What if you try insulting him again? She said, remembering how he responded to her last time. Shinobu. Okay Ni-san. Once again Shinobu stepped in Tomioka's way and with a victorious smile began to speak. Shinobu. Tomioka-san, if you keep this up everyone will hate you. Tomioka. Nobody hates me, he said angrily while frowning. Both sisters were surprised again, but a little less so. However, when they saw that Tomioka responded when they insulted him in that way, they realized they could have a little conversation with him if they made that move. Shinobu. Then why aren't you answering me? Tomioka. I'm not obligated to do that, he said seriously and left. Shinobu. Did you notice, Ni-san? Annie? Yes, it seems we can make him talk if you insult him. So both sisters went to their farm with a note on their heads to make Tomioka talk. They didn't know why, but they desperately wanted to be with Tomioka. During the time they tried to make him talk, they felt a little attraction because they didn't deny he was kind of handsome, but that attraction increased when he spoke and played the lyre. Chapter 3. 2 months had passed, and during that time the Kochou sisters had managed, so to speak, to become Tomioka's friends, since he would answer them from time to time. But the reason he answered them was because if he didn't, they would never shut up, and he wanted to be quiet for a few moments. But doing that brought him consequences. During the time Tomioka was answering their questions, the sisters grew closer to him. They spent more time with him, even asking the boss to change their schedules to be with him. It wasn't long before Tomioka regretted what he had caused. He used to have peace on missions, but now he didn't have a single minute of peace. They were always with him. Now only the nights remained. Would his farm be a place of peace if they didn't visit him every day? Right now, Tomioka was on a mission, and luckily, he was on this one alone. He already missed the peace of missions. He found the demon and killed it without any difficulty. He was going to take his time walking to the inn, since he wanted to be alone for a while. The forest was beautiful, even more so with the moon illuminating the place. He saw that it was time to play his instrument, the lyre. It wasn't something he bought just for the sake of it. It had belonged to his sister. She always played a melody before going to sleep, and he did the same because he didn't want to forget her. That instrument was something very precious to him, not to mention the only thing he had left of his sister. When he finished playing the melody, he was crying. He couldn't stop crying. Some time ago, he thought he had forgotten about it, but he couldn't. He felt useless for not helping his sister, and he felt even worse, remembering how his friend sacrificed himself because he was weak. He still thought he didn't deserve the position of pillar because he was weak. He cried for a few moments until he decided to leave, but he didn't know that 2 people were watching him. These people were Shinobu and Kani. The reason they were there was because they had asked the master to go check on Tomioka and offer support if needed. He agreed, and they both went. When they found him, they hid when they saw he was crying. They were surprised to see him crying while showing an emotion that wasn't hidden by his serious face. They couldn't help but feel bad seeing Tomioka cry until they saw him start to leave. They followed him and appeared in front of him to make it seem like they had found him by chance. Shinobu. Ara, Tomioka-san, you've finished the mission. Tomioka. He just ignored her. Right now he didn't want to talk to them, much less see them. He was in a depressive state, so to speak. The 3 went to the inn, and before the sisters could speak to ask for a room, Tomioka asked for a room by himself and left. They were a little angry, but the woman in charge told them that there were no more rooms available and that they would have to go with Tomioka. He, who overheard this, became angry. He wanted to be alone and at peace, but the world played a cruel trick on him that day. The 3 of them went to the room to rest and prepare to go to headquarters tomorrow. Luckily, there were 3 futons, and the room was large enough for them to sleep separately. The 3 went to sleep, but at midnight, Kani woke up and went to Tomioka's futon and fell asleep next to him. If Tomioka woke up, she had the excuse that she was cold and her sister didn't like to share a futon. It was a good excuse for her opinion. The next morning, Tomioka was the first to wake up and saw Kani sleeping on her futon. He got up quickly and decided not to say anything. He didn't want to cause any trouble, but it would be better if he stayed away from her. He decided to go eat and leave right away. When he went to eat, he was wondering why they were approaching him. There was nothing special about him. He just kept his distance from everyone and didn't talk. He didn't understand why they wanted to be near him. But right then, in the room, Kani and Shinobu woke up. Kani was surprised not to see Tomioka, so she assumed he had woken up and noticed her. Shinobu saw her sister with Tomioka, something that angered her greatly. Although they both knew they wanted Tomioka, she didn't like the idea of one of them having him all to herself. But right then, they got up intending to go have breakfast, and when they went outside, they saw Tomioka leaving, and to their eyes, without having eaten. Kani. Tomioka-san, why aren't you eating breakfast? Tomioka. I already had breakfast, he said quickly, then left and headed towards headquarters. Both sisters were dissatisfied with that answer. They wanted to have breakfast with him, but it seemed he had already arrived. When they finished breakfast, they went to catch up with Tomioka, who was already halfway to the headquarters. Shinobu. Nina, Tomioka-san, were you never taught to wait? She said somewhat angrily. Tomioka. He didn't answer and kept walking. Kani. Tomioka-san, don't be so rude to us, she said with a smile. Tomioka. He also ignored her, but wondered why they wanted to talk. After all, they were barely friends, if you could even call it a friendship. They arrived at headquarters and gave their mission report. Then the 3 of them went to their respective estates, but Shinobu went to the water estate to get something. What exactly? Well, she went for a shirt that Giyuu owned. The first time she entered the estate, she saw Giyuu's shirt lying around. She was going to pick it up and take it to him, but Giyuu had gone inside and the same thing happened as before. But this time, Giyuu didn't go to his estate. He went to a village to eat. She managed to get inside and saw Giyuu's shirt there. She grabbed it and was about to leave quickly, but she couldn't help but smell it. Well, for some, smelling him was disgusting, for Shinobu it was a gift. The shirt smelled like him and she couldn't help but blush. She didn't waste any more time and left since it was getting dark. She arrived at her estate and was going to put on her pajamas but decided to put on Giyuu's shirt instead. It was a little big on her and she looked very cute, of course, if we ignore the fact that it was stolen. Before going to sleep, she smelled the shirt with great pleasure and thus ended up asleep. Chapter 4. It was a new day for the demon slayers. Some pillars were getting up to go on their missions, but we'll see the water pillar, who was waking up but felt something heavy and couldn't get up. On top of him was Kanny. He didn't know why or how she had entered his estate, but he tried to get up so there wouldn't be a misunderstanding. He managed to get up, but the movement woke Kanny up. He noticed this and decided to ask why she was on his estate. "Tomioka. Kochou-san, can you tell me why you're here?" he said very seriously. Kanny. "Well, I was cold, Shinobu doesn't like to share futons." Tomioka. "And why did he come here if he could have put down more sheets or gone with one of your girls or another pillar?" Kanny. Well, I didn't know where the other pillars or their estates were, and since I knew where your estate was, I came here. Besides, my girls don't like to share either," she said, thinking he wouldn't believe her. Tomioka. "So that was the reason, but as far as I know, you visited some of the other pillars' estates, so I deduce that you're lying," he said somewhat angrily since peace was no longer something he could enjoy. Kanny. "You seriously don't believe me?" she said while pouting, and luckily for her, Tomioka was surprised to see how much she resembled his sister, so he thought it was her for a moment. Tomioka. "I'm sorry for doubting you," he said fearfully, remembering how his sister would get angry when she didn't believe him. Kanny couldn't believe what she was doing. He apologized for not believing her and even bowed in a gesture of repentance. This brought a smile to her face, as it seemed Tomioka trusted her more. But she was surprised to see him with a fearful expression. She didn't know the reason for that expression until she heard a name. Tomioka. "Tsutako ni," he said while letting out a tear. He missed his sister so much that even a scary picture of her would make him cry for losing her that day. Kanny. "Who is Tsutako?" she said, somewhat confused and jealous. Tomioka. "Huh. Oh, sorry, but when you pouted you looked like my sister," he said somewhat sadly, as he was imagining things. Kanny. "And why were you scared? Did she hurt you?" she said worriedly. Tomioka. "That's not it, but I'd rather not talk about that matter, and I ask that you leave my property please." Kanny. "Okay," she said, giving up, but she got something. Tomioka at least spoke to her more than usual, which was at most 2 or 3 words, and they were always no or yes. When she left Tomioka's estate, she went straight to her own estate to wake up her sister. She arrived and went to her sister's room, but when she entered and pulled back the sheets, she saw that her sister was wearing a shirt that was much too big for her. She noticed Tomioka's scent on the shirt. She decided not to do anything and left, but she was somewhat angry because Shinobu had stolen something, and it was none other than Tomioka's clothes. The day continued normally, except that Tsunemi had to train with someone, and the other pillars were busy, and only Tomioka remained, and in a fit of anger, he went to ask him to train. Tsunemi. "Hey bastard," he said angrily. Tomioka. "What's wrong, Shinagizawa-san?" he said in a respectful tone since the wind pillar didn't speak to him, so he had to be respectful. Tsunemi. "I came because I need to train and everyone else is busy." Tomioka. "I don't see the problem." So they both began training. It could be said that Tomioka was spotting his weaknesses thanks to Tsunemi tapping him with a wooden sword in areas he wasn't paying attention to. But the fight escalated to a high level when Tomioka saw an opportunity to stab him, and when he did, Tsunemi became enraged and they fought seriously, resulting in injuries for both of them. Tsunemi went to the estate to be treated, but Tomioka left. After what had happened that morning, he didn't want to see Kanny. He preferred to avoid her at all costs if possible. At the butterfly farm, Tsunemi went to Kanny to be healed. They only had a relationship of mutual respect, so what happened in each other's lives didn't matter much to them until Kanny asked. "Kanny? Tsunemi-san, how did you hurt yourself?" she said doubtfully. Tsunemi. "I trained with Tomioka and we both got hurt." Hana. "And where is he? I suppose he's hurt too." She said happily at being able to see Tomioka. Tsunemi. "He is, but I don't know why he didn't come to get cured," he said it normally. Kanny. "I see," she said sadly, but Tsunemi didn't notice. Annie continued healing Tsunemi, but Shinobu heard everything and saw her opportunity to visit Tomioka since he was injured and it was her duty to heal him and quickly grabbed some things and went to the water estate to see Tomioka and heal him. According to her, her intentions were different. When she arrived at the farm, she knocked on the door and Tomioka opened it. He seemed to be fine, but if you paid closer attention, you would notice that he was wincing in pain. Tomioka. What's wrong, Kocho-san? He said seriously. Shinobu. Well, I heard you trained with Tsunemi-san and got hurt, so I came to heal you. Tomioka. But I'm fine, he said it so she would leave. He didn't want to have any conversation with the sisters, much less Kanny. Shinobu. Don't lie to me, Tomioka-san. It's obvious you're in pain. Let me in so I can heal you. She said, smiling. Tomioka. Okay, he said with a sigh, she was right, his wounds hurt. So Shinobu went to the room and began to heal the wounds. He had wounds on his shoulders, legs, and one that she hoped to heal soon, which was on his chest. The wound was a cut because Tsunemi used his breathing to cause more damage. Shinobu. Tomioka-san, I need you to remove the hunter's outfit from the chest area. I can see you're bleeding a little. He just nodded and took off only a little bit so she could treat it. She was a little disappointed, but at least she could see a little of his body. She started by cleaning the wound, then put some alcohol on it so it wouldn't get infected, and then bandaged it. Tomioka was going to put his suit back on, but Shinobu stopped him. Tomioka. What's wrong, Kocho-san? He said, sounding annoyed, wanting everything to end as soon as possible. Shinobu. I still have something to check, she said smiling, but there was a small mischievous tone that wasn't noticeable. Tomioka just nodded and didn't put on his suit, while Shinobu pretended just to be able to touch Tomioka's body a little, but Tomioka, being still innocent, believed that she was checking if there was anything wrong. Tomioka. Are you done yet? He said, intending to end it now, as it was making him uncomfortable. Shinobu. We're almost there, she said, but she wanted to continue. A few minutes passed until Shinobu told him that it was over. He thanked her for helping him, but Shinobu, unable to resist any longer, hugged him tightly. Tomioka. What happened now? He said, already tired. Shinobu. Well, I want a reward for helping you. Tomioka. How much money are you asking for? He said it normally, he thought he was going to charge him. Shinobu. Not with money. Tomioka. So what, I have nothing more to offer you than that. He said, confused. Shinobu. If there is anything. Tomioka. And what would that be? He said, confused. Shinobu. Let me be your friend and talk a little more. Tomioka. And that's why. Shinobu. I want you to be more sociable, you barely answer me with a yes or a no. Tomioka. If it's to pay for the help, that's fine, he said with a sigh, hoping it wouldn't disturb his peace. Shinobu. Besides, I want to stay here overnight from time to time. Tomioka. And why is that? He said more seriously. Shinobu. I'll stay, it's getting late and I can't go back to my estate, she said it normally, but in reality she had already thought everything through, now she could sleep next to Tomioka. Tomioka. As long as it's just for sleeping and that's it, I don't want the peace of this place to be disturbed, he said somewhat angrily, since it seemed that she wanted to take away one of the few places he had left. Shinobu. Yes, don't worry, by the way, I think it's getting a bit late, noticing that it was already night. Tomioka. How much time has passed? He said doubtfully. Shinobu. I don't know, but now do your part by letting me sleep here. Tomioka. Okay, there's an empty room with a futon over there, you can sleep there, he said, while pointing to a room. Shinobu. Thank you, she said, then left. Tomioka went to his room to fall asleep, but at midnight Shinobu got up and went to Tomioka's room. She watched him sleeping peacefully, stroking his hair, but on impulse she kissed his cheek. After a while, she went to her own room to sleep and have a new day with Tomioka and see if she could win him over before Kanny. Chapter 5. It was a new day at the water estate. Tomioka Giyuu, the water pillar, was waking up as usual, but now he felt a weight on top of him. He didn't know why, since he hadn't slept with anything on him, and even if he had, the weight was too heavy to be an object. He opened his eyes and saw Kocho Shinobu on top of him, nestled peacefully on his chest. He wanted to get off, but noticed she was hugging him. Although she was small, she had a certain strength, a strength he couldn't handle at that moment since he was just waking up. He tried to pry himself off at all costs, but the small movements woke the butterfly. Shinobu. What's wrong, Tomioka-san? Tomioka. Why are you here? He said seriously. Shinobu. I was sleeping, which isn't obvious, she said mockingly, though nervous about the situation. Tomioka. I know you were sleeping, but why are you sleeping on my futon, or rather on top of me? He said seriously. Shinobu. I was cold, this place is kind of cold, it's very hot here, so I came here. Tomioka. There were more sheets in case you were cold, besides, your sister told me you didn't like sharing a futon, he said seriously and doubtfully. Shinobu. Although I don't like to share some things, I never told my sister that I mind sharing futons, she said, somewhat annoyed by her sister's strategy. Tomioka. You can take it off, he said normally and with a poker face. Shinobu. No, I'm sleepy and I don't want to move, you're a very good pillow. Tomioka. I need to get up to work, he said, already frowning. Shinobu. Your schedule and mine are the same, and that's a long way off. As he said that, Tomioka cursed himself for forgetting that. That was his only way to escape this awkward situation. His mind was now working at maximum speed to get rid of it, but he remembered something he could do. Tomioka. Your sister will worry if she can't find you, plus you'll have to take care of the others, he said while in his mind he had a smile knowing that he could win. Shinobu. You're right, she said, somewhat annoyed to see that he was right, but she had a card up her sleeve. Shinobu. You know, now that I remember, my sister had a mission in the morning, so she won't have to worry. Besides, my girls can take care of it, she said with a victorious smile. At those words, Tomioka cursed in his mind for the second time. He didn't know what to do anymore. His mind raced with ideas and generated scenarios, and in each one, Shinobu had an answer. He was cornered and didn't know what to do anymore. But luckily, or perhaps not, a crow appeared. Crow. Caw mission for Tomioka Giyuu along with the flower pillar, go to the train station to meet with her caw. Tomioka didn't know whether to thank the crow for freeing him from that situation or curse it for having to go on a mission with Kani. His goal was to avoid them as much as possible, but that wasn't possible if he had missions with them, and even less so if they slept with him. He didn't know what to do anymore, and resignedly, he had to accept that they would never leave him, even if he wished they weren't there. But he still didn't know why they were drawn to him. He didn't understand. Shinobu angrily stood up and left, leaving Tomioka to change. But she didn't leave completely. She lingered in the doorway, leaving a small opening to watch him. Thinking she was gone, he began removing his shirt, revealing his well-toned body. Shinobu blushed as a trickle of blood ran from her nose. She couldn't help but smile mischievously, admiring every part of his upper body. Her attention was even more drawn to him as he removed his pants. She longed to see Tomioka's member, but unfortunately, he had his back to her. She couldn't deny, however, that he had a good physique. The trickle of blood grew longer, eventually becoming a nosebleed that spurted out silently. Tomioka had already changed and was leaving, but when he left his room, he saw a small trail of blood in the living room, while Shinobu was on the wall. Tomioka. Kochou said worriedly when he saw her as she was on the wall while she had blood, but he didn't notice that it was from her nose. He took her to the butterfly estate carrying her bridal style, and left her in the living room with a note with a description of what happened. Then he went to the train station and met Kani. She saw him and greeted him with a big smile, but her mischievousness was obvious. If it weren't for Tomioka's innocence, she would have noticed. They both entered the train. Giyuu sat in a seat, but Kani sat next to him. The problem was that she was too close. No, not too close, extremely close. Kani's hand was getting very close to Giyuu's private parts. He was nervous and tried to move away, but she instantly moved closer, even accidentally falling on top of him. He moved back a little, until he reached the edge where he could no longer separate himself. Kani. Giyuu-kun, what's wrong? She said, feigning innocence, as if she hadn't done anything. Kani called him that because he accepted it, thinking she did it because they had a friendly relationship. God, how innocent Tomioka is. But getting back to normal, Tomioka had to endure Kani's gaze, which, although normal, made him afraid. Kani. One question, Giyuu-kun, why did my sister go to your estate yesterday? She said hesitantly. Tomioka. She came because she told me she heard I was hurt and she healed me, but she asked me for some kind of payment. Kani. And what payment did he ask for? She said while afraid that she would take away Giyuu's first time. Kani wanted to be his first time. Tomioka. He asked me to be his friend and to talk a little, and also asked to stay overnight at my farm if it got late, and he couldn't go to his farm, he said seriously. Kani. I see, and how was your morning? She said in order to change the subject. Tomioka. It was very strange, Kochou-sen was asleep with me, and I didn't understand why, plus I found her bleeding in the living room. The strange thing is that there were no demons since it was daytime. Kani. What do you mean, it's bleeding, and you didn't hear anything? She said worriedly. Tomioka. No, I finished changing and went outside, and there she was bleeding. The strange thing is that she was red. Could she be sick? At what the water pillar said, Kani rolled her eyes. She had already expected what had happened and was angry thinking about Shinobu's fate because of the sight she had seen, but she was more surprised to see how innocent he was. She found that endearing. Chapter 6 Tomioka and Kani arrived at the place where the demon was located. They made no effort to eliminate it since it was a normal one, it had nothing special, just a blood technique that it had not used, but before the demon disappeared, it launched its blood technique. Demon. Blood technique, return to the young world he said, then the attack hit Tomioka as he was distracted. Annie. Giyuu-kun. She screamed as she saw her partner hit by that attack, but she was surprised to see a child emerging from the smoke that formed. Tomioka. What happened? He said, confused. Annie. Tomioka, are you okay? She asked worriedly. Tomioka. I'm fine, but it's because I'm smaller he said, seeing how he was like that. Annie. I think the technique transformed you into the child you were in the past she said, while noticing how Tomioka's uniform was somewhat large. Tomioka. I see, now what will I do, my uniform is too big for me. Annie. I don't know, but you look very cute she said with hearts in her eyes when she saw the little Tomioka, but she returned to normal. Tomioka. Well, the suit is too big for me, but I can walk to headquarters. I hope there's a cure for this. Annie. Okay, if you can't walk, tell me she said, seeing her opportunity. They both walked along, but on the way many people asked her if Tomioka was her brother or her son. This made Annie blush a little as she imagined having a family with Giyuu, but she returned to normal. When they arrived at the hunter's headquarters, they reported what happened and why Giyuu was like this. They ran tests and it was shown that he would be like this for a whole month, but that his abilities and strength remained intact. The only thing that changed was his age and size. Giyuu. What do I do now? He said, knowing he would be like this for a whole month. Annie. Don't be discouraged, Giyuu-kun, this will pass and you'll return to normal, but for now enjoy this little vacation you have she said playfully, but she couldn't stop looking at Giyuu because he was very adorable. Shinobu. Ni-san, are you back yet? Annie. Oh hello Shinobu-chan, I'm back and look who's here she said, showing Giyuu. Shinobu. And who is the child? He looks a lot like Tomioka-san. Annie. He is Giyuu-kun, he suffered a demon attack and transformed into a child. Shinobu. It seems I'm not the dwarf anymore she said mockingly. Giyuu. Don't get too excited, Kochou-san, I'll be back to normal in a month he said in his serious voice, but age changed his voice a little, which caused the sisters to look at him with tenderness. In their eyes, he was too cute. Shinobu. Kawaii she said while hugging Giyuu tightly. Giyuu. Kochou-san, can you let me go? He said with his poker face. Shinobu. But you're so kawaii she said while pouting at having to separate from him. Giyuu. I'm leaving, goodbye Kochou-san he said to both of them and then left. He was walking to his estate, but some of the pillars were watching as a child was walking to the water estate. Mitsuri, the love pillar, thought the child was cute and decided to approach him to ask what he was doing there. Mitsuri. Hey kid, what are you doing here? She said while smiling. Giyuu. Hello Kanroji-san he said seriously. Mitsuri. How do you know my name? She said, surprised. Giyuu. It's me, Tomioka Giyuu he said without changing his cold tone. Mitsuri. Tomioka-san, is that you? She said, even more surprised. Giyuu. Yes, goodbye he said as he resumed his journey. Mitsuri. But how did you become a child? Giyuu. A demon did it, I'll be like this for a month. Mitsuri. Oh I see, but you're very kawaii she said while her eyes sparkled. Giyuu. Okay, goodbye he said, then left. Mitsuri told all the pillars what happened and Sanemi and Aguro went to make fun of him, but Giyuu just ignored them. Then he arrived at his estate and prepared to go to sleep since he was tired, but when he was about to sleep there was a knock at his door. Annoyed, he went to open the door and saw the Kocho sisters there. Giyuu. What do Kochos need? Annie. Well, we came to take care of you. She said smiling. Giyuu. Take care of me? He said, not understanding. Shinobu. Well, since you're smaller, you won't be able to do some things like cooking because you're smaller than me. Giyuu. I can take good care of myself, so it's not necessary. Shinobu. Well, I'm sorry, but we won't. She said, then avoided Giyuu, as did Kanny. Both decided to explore the estate, while Giyuu was angry because they entered his estate, even though he told them not to. Giyuu let them see the estate. He had planned to go out anyway. At first, he wanted to rest, but after what had happened, he didn't want to stay on his estate. He grabbed his lyre and went to the field where he played his sister's song, and while he was there, he played another song he remembered. It seemed the technique hadn't just made him small, but at that age, he remembered some things and regretted forgetting them. Apparently, his sister had another melody he had forgotten, and he planned to go and listen to it again. But what he didn't count on was that the Kocho sisters saw him leave and decided to follow him. They knew that when he went out it was to play his lyre. The melody of the lyre that Tomioka played was music and a stress reliever for them. They never got tired of it. When they arrived at the field, they made sure that Giyuu couldn't hear or see them. So Giyuu began to play his lyre. It was the same music. After a while, he finished. The sisters were satisfied, but they watched with some surprise as he began to play again. They paid close attention because they noticed that the note he was about to play was not the same as before, and they listened. When the sisters finished playing, they were very surprised. The melody was beautiful, but even in that melody there was sadness too. They went back to Giyuu's estate so that he wouldn't suspect anything. Giyuu returned to his estate and found the sisters talking in the living room. He simply ignored them and went to his room to sleep. He couldn't take it anymore. He had no energy left. When he lay down, he closed his eyes, but now the sisters were talking about some things and they saw Giyuu go to his room. Shinobu. Ni-san, one question, why did you sleep one night with Tomioka-san? Hanny. I was cold, she said nervously. Shinobu. Don't lie, besides, you told Tomioka-san that I don't like to share, she said smiling but somewhat angrily. Hanny. Well, to be honest, I like Giyuu-kun, she said blushing. Shinobu. Well, that's surprising, but to be honest, it's the same case with me. She said, blushing. Hanny. So what do we do? She said hesitantly upon learning that her sister also liked Tomioka. Shinobu. We have two options, either we share him between the two of us or we compete for him, she said, waiting for her answer. Deep down, she wanted Tomioka for herself, but she also didn't want to ruin the relationship she had with her sister. Hanny. I think that. Chapter 7. In the last chapter, Shinobu asked her sister Kanny if they were competing for Giyuu or sharing him, and at that moment Kanny was about to answer. Hanny. I think we share it, she said, somewhat unsure of her sister's answer. Shinobu. I think it's for the best, she said sympathetically. Hanny. Are you sure? She said, somewhat surprised. Shinobu. Yes, besides, I don't want to have a bad relationship with you, Ni-san, it's best if we share it between the two of us. Hanny. Then it's decided, we'll both be Giyuu-kun's partners, she said smiling. Then they decided to go to sleep in the guest room, but before going in they turned to look at Giyuu's room. They couldn't bear the thought of sleeping away from their Giyuu-kun, so they both went to his room and saw him there sleeping peacefully. He wasn't moving. If they thought his face was cute while he slept, now it was even cuter because he was so small. They couldn't stand it and both fell asleep on his futon. Kanny was on Giyuu's right side and Shinobu on his left. They both hugged him. Since he was so small, they could hug him all over. And that's how they fell asleep. The next morning, both sisters woke up very happy. They were afraid that Giyuu would wake up, but they saw that he was still sleeping very calmly. They both smiled and got up. They noticed that Giyuu had grown a little, so they deduced that the effect of the demon's attack was wearing off. The whole month had passed since Giyuu returned to normal. He noticed that the sisters were acting even closer to him. Giyuu tried to distance himself from them by not staying at his estate and going to other places, but they always followed him, secretly appearing as if by pure chance. Being the innocent boy he was, he believed it was too much of a coincidence. On other occasions, he noticed them both entering his room and sniffing his clothes. He thought they were checking if they were dirty, but that idea vanished when he saw how much stronger their smells became as they paced the floor. He became frightened and hid his clothes to avoid that scene, but he never noticed that the two sisters slept on his futon while hugging him. Right now he was on a mission with the Kocho sisters. He was on a train in a different seat to be away from them, but he noticed their eyes on him, something that made him nervous, but he tried to ignore them, but both sisters were talking about how to make him fall in love with them. Shinobu. Ni-san, did you think of something to make Giyuu-kun fall in love with you? Hanny. No, Shinobu, he doesn't seem to get the hints, he's very innocent. Shinobu. If we want to have a chance, we have to take away that innocence, she said, thinking about opportunities. Hanny. I think so, but how do we do it without traumatizing him? She said hesitantly. Shinobu. I don't know, but we have to think about it later, we're almost there. As he said that, the train stopped and the three got off. Giyuu was walking ahead to avoid having to see them. The three arrived at a village that was being destroyed by a demon. The three went to attack it, but the demon dodged their attacks with some difficulty. But he used his blood technique, this technique would take away Giyuu's innocence. Demon. Blood technique, altered body, saying that he threw a kind of pink powder that hit Shinobu and Kanny, both sisters, fell somewhat exhausted but very suffocated, they felt a lot of heat in their bodies, and even more when they saw Giyuu going for them when he finished cutting off the demon's head. Giyuu. Kanny-san, Shinobu-san, are you alright? He said worriedly as he saw them trying to breathe heavily. Hanny. If we're okay, we just need to rest. Shinobu. Let's go to an inn. The three went to the inn and asked for 2 rooms. Giyuu was the one who requested it since he didn't want to be with them. He had noticed that on the way there they were looking at him much more than before and that they were very red-faced, so he did it. The owner gave them the rooms, but when Giyuu left, the Kocho sisters asked to be in the same room as Giyuu. She didn't know why they asked for that, but then other people arrived and she thought it was convenient to have more space. You might wonder why they were asking for that and why they were blushing. Well, the demon's technique made people's hormones go haywire and they, who already had perverted thoughts about him before the technique, now couldn't stand the urge to be with him. Both sisters saw that he was already asleep, so they rushed in. Shinobu knew that if they made noise, he would resist, so she secretly injected him with a paralyzing poison. Unable to resist any longer, they kissed him on the cheeks, but Kani was the first to kiss him on the mouth. She couldn't resist, but Shinobu pulled away and kissed him passionately as well. Both sisters decided to establish who owned him and gave him a hickey on each side of his neck, which caused Giyuu to wake up with a big surprise. Giyuu. What are you doing? He said very nervously. Shinobu. Ara Giyuu-kun, you woke up. Kani. That's good, she said mischievously. Both sisters continued kissing Giyuu until Giyuu, using total concentration breathing, veins appeared on his body and made the poison disappear. He freed himself and ran away. He didn't know what was happening to them, but the best thing to do at that moment was to run, since both sisters were chasing him without losing sight of him. Giyuu. Damn, at this rate they'll catch me, he said nervously, but then he had an idea. He would hit them on the neck that would knock them unconscious long enough for him to take them to the inn and be far away. He put his plan into action and with some difficulty knocked them unconscious. He carried them to the inn through the window, laid them on the futons, and left in case anything happened. He didn't know the reason for their behavior, but now more than ever he was going to stay away, even changing his schedule so as not to see them on missions. It was a new day and the sisters woke up somewhat confused, but they remembered how they acted at night and how they chased Giyuu. They both blushed to levels they never thought they would reach. Now they didn't know how they were going to talk after that scene, but they saw that Giyuu wasn't there and there was only a note. They both decided to read the note. Giyuu's note. Kani-san and Shinobu-san, I think the demon's technique affected you somewhat since you acted very strangely last night. I had to knock you out to calm you down. I've already left for headquarters. Goodbye. After finishing reading, they couldn't help but feel very embarrassed. They thought they hadn't done anything wrong, but then they remembered kissing him and leaving a hickey. They didn't know what to do, but they decided to go to headquarters. They both arrived and went to the farm, since the note said that Giyuu would give the report. But on the way they saw that Giyuu was walking to his water estate, but both sisters got in his way. Kani. Giyuu-kun, can we talk? She said, blushing slightly. Giyuu tried to get away from them, but Shinobu grabbed his sleeve. Shinobu. Tomioka-san, we want to fix things, please, she said, somewhat embarrassed. Giyuu. Okay, he said, sounding a little nervous. The three of them went to a field to talk about what happened that night. Giyuu. It's good that you want to talk. Kani. Well, we wanted to tell you that we weren't aware of what we were doing. The demon's technique made us so agitated that we did strange things. Shinobu. We're telling you now so there aren't any misunderstandings. Giyuu. I understand, he said, then left. What he didn't know was that both sisters had cooperated to have that with Giyuu, only they lied to him so there wouldn't be any problems, but they were happy to know that they had their first kiss with him. Chapter 8. A month had passed and Giyuu had avoided the butterfly sisters the entire time. This time it was effective as he changed his schedule to avoid seeing them and if there was a meeting, he stayed away from them. This didn't affect him at all. He just wanted some peace and also wanted to think about how to talk to them after that incident. Although they apologized, he didn't want to talk to them or see them for the moment. But on the sisters' side, they were in a bad state, not because of a physical injury, but emotionally. They were in that state because they felt terrible about how Giyuu was avoiding them. Although they apologized, they couldn't even speak to him anymore, but right now they were determined to talk to him, no matter how much he avoided them. And how would they do it? They knew he had changed his schedule and decided to ask the boss to let them go on a mission with him in case he needed support. Right now the three were on their way to a mountain because according to the information the demon was stalking those who were nearby, they found him and killed him without difficulty. Giyuu was planning to leave, but the sisters got in his way. Kani. Giyuu-kun, we want to talk to you for a while, she said, somewhat serious but nervous. Giyuu. He just nodded, but he was nervous. They both went to a small forest to talk about what happened that month. Shinobu. Well, Giyuu-san, we wanted to ask you why you avoid us, she said seriously but somewhat sadly, but Giyuu noticed that tone of sadness, he knew he had to be honest. Giyuu. I avoid them after what happened, he said seriously. Kani. But we already apologize for that, so why don't you want to talk? She said sadly, with tears threatening to spill over. Giyuu. I wanted to clear my mind, that's why I stepped away to find some peace and quiet, he said seriously. Shinobu. I see, she said, sounding somewhat sad. Kani. Then everything will go back to normal, she said, sounding somewhat hopeful. Giyuu. I suppose so. Shinobu. One question, Giyuu-san, why are you friends with us and not with the others? She said doubtfully, wanting to know the reason. Giyuu? You all look too much like them, he said with a smile that surprised the sisters. Hanny? We kind of resemble them, the ones you mean. Giyuu? My sister and my friend Kani-san is like my sister because of how you are, and Shinobu-san is like her because of how she is too, that's why I was their friend, they remind me of them, he said, then had a sad tone of voice. Shinobu? So that's why you're our friend, she said, somewhat annoyed that he was comparing them to them. Giyuu? Not only that, you have something different from them, and those attitudes you have, I could say I like them. If you think I compare you to them, I understand why you don't want to talk to me, he said, then started walking and went to headquarters so he wouldn't see them anymore, thinking that they would start to hate him. Shinobu? Giyuu-san, wait, she said while grabbing her sleeve, as did Kani. He turned to look at them and noticed that they were somewhat red. Giyuu? What's wrong? He said seriously. Kani? Giyuu-kun, we want you to know something we've always wanted to tell you, but we never had the courage. Giyuu? Get to the point, he said, intrigued by that. Shinobu. Kani? Giyuu Tomioka, we love you. Giyuu was surprised by what they said, but he began to tremble. This was something he wanted to avoid. He didn't want anyone to become attached to him, and he didn't want to become attached to anyone either. That's why he was trembling as tears streamed from his eyes. The sisters watched in surprise. His face showed fear and despair. Without them noticing, he ran off in a different direction, away from headquarters. Kani? I think he rejected us, she said sadly. Shinobu? No, he didn't say anything, but he's trembling. It doesn't seem like a rejection. We have to follow him to see what happens, she said, worried about the water pillar. They both ran, and along the way they saw some tears on the ground. They became more worried, but after running for a while they saw their companion standing on a grave while crying and trembling. The clouds gathered and it began to rain. The sisters covered themselves from the rain, but they saw that Giyuu did nothing. He just cried more until he began to speak. Giyuu? Ni-san, what should I do? If someone gets attached to me, they'll be sad if I die, so I don't want to get attached to anyone. What should I do? He said, almost pleading. Both sisters were surprised. They didn't think he wouldn't want to get attached to someone who would suffer, but what was wrong with that? Getting attached to someone wasn't bad, but he replied. Giyuu? Whenever I get attached to someone they die because I'm weak, tell me Ni-san, what should I do, he said while crying more. Both sisters finally understood what he meant. He thought that if he had a friend or something like that, he would die because of him. They couldn't stand it and ran to hug him. Giyuu, feeling the hug, became even more afraid. Giyuu? What are you doing here? Stay away, I'm a danger, he said while trembling. Kani? Giyuu-kun, it's not your fault they died, it's just one of those things. Shinobu? You're not a danger, Giyuu-kun. These things just happen. Never blame yourself for what happens to you. Giyuu? But it was all my fault, he said while crying. Kani? Don't blame yourself anymore, we've all lost someone and we were weak at first, what you can do is enjoy your life in the name of those you lost, she said while hugging him tighter. She knew what it was like to lose family, but she didn't know what it felt like to blame yourself for what happened to them. Shinobu? Calm down, Giyuu-kun, she said, and did the same as her sister. Both sisters didn't know that he suffered that. They lost their parents, but at least they had each other, but he had no one, but that would change. Giyuu fell asleep from crying so much. Both sisters noticed this and decided to stay with him until he woke up. Shinobu and Kani let go, and they both laid him down on the grass. They didn't leave his side at any time. They turned to look at the gravestone, and it read, Tsutako Tomioka, sister of Giyuu Tomioka, cause of death, demon, last words, live Giyuu and promise me you will be happy. After finishing reading, they felt bad for how Giyuu blamed himself for his sister's death. They remembered how he acted. Apparently, he had a trauma and a problem, thinking that if he had friends, they would die. They would do everything possible to get him out of that hole he had fallen into. Chapter 9. Giyuu was asleep, dreaming of how his loved ones had died. First his sister, then Sabito. He didn't know what to do and screamed for it to stop, but it was a dream. He couldn't do anything. Then he was plunged into complete darkness. He was crying, but then he saw a light. He walked for a while until it revealed itself. Shinobu and Kani were there, and they repeated the same words they had said when they confessed to him. He didn't know what to say to those words. He had never felt what love for another person was like, but now he was having an argument with himself. Whether to accept or not. He just remained still in the darkness of his mind. Meanwhile, outside of Giyuu's dream, the sisters remembered their confessions, but what would happen if he rejected them? After seeing that he didn't want to get attached to anyone, they didn't know if he would accept them, but all they could do was wait. About 2 hours had passed while Giyuu was deciding whether to accept or not, but he thought that pretending to forget what they said was the best decision, so that nothing would happen. He began to wake up, and both sisters saw this and helped him to his feet, but they wanted to end the doubt he had. "Hanny? Giyuu-kun, what do you say to what we've told you?" she said, already wanting to know the answer. "Giyuu?" What he said confused, but he knew what he meant. "Shinobu? You don't remember?" she said, sounding a little sad. "Giyuu? I don't understand what you're talking about," he said seriously, wanting to get it over with. "Shinobu? I'm fed up, Giyuu-kun, if you don't remember I'll tell you again, my sister and I love you," she said while crying a little. "Hanny? Giyuu-kun, we want to know your answer," she said crying. Giyuu didn't know what to say anymore. He thought they were going to avoid the topic, but now he didn't know what to do. Although he liked them, he didn't know if he felt love for them, so he answered. "Giyuu? To be honest, I don't know how to accept it, I don't know what it feels like to feel love for someone, so I can't reciprocate," he said seriously. "Hanny? It's like you don't know what it feels like to love someone," she said sadly but somewhat surprised. "Giyuu? You could say that in a way I have no feelings," he said seriously. "Shinobu? We see. Giyuu? Goodbye," he said as he left. "Hanny? Wait, if we manage to make you feel something for us, you'll accept us," she said it somewhat hopefully, and Shinobu saw that with some hope. "Giyuu? I suppose so," he said as he walked away, wondering why he saw them in his dream. "Hanny? Then this is the first step," she said as she stood in front of him and gave him a kiss and separated with a smile. Shinobu didn't stay behind and also gave him a kiss. Giyuu didn't know why, but he felt good about it, but he didn't accept them because of the surprise. "Giyuu? Why did you do that?" he said with a slight blush. "Shinobu? As Nisan said, that was the first step," she said smiling. That was the beginning for Giyuu to be able to have the feeling of love. A whole month had passed and Giyuu could finally feel things for the sisters, but he never said anything since he thought it was too late to accept that, but they thought about it and decided to ask him. "Shinobu? Hey Giyuu-kun, we wanted to know if you finally feel something for us," she said very hopefully. "Hanny? And we want the truth," she said smiling. "Giyuu? Sigh well, the truth is I do feel something for you now, but I think it's too late for me to accept you, since I think he couldn't finish as he was hugged tightly. The three of them were on a mission, so no one saw them. "Hanny? Never think that we're going to hate you, like we told you a month ago, we love you," she said very happily, and Shinobu was the same way, finally after so many attempts he had accepted them. "Shinobu? So you agree to have a relationship with both of them?" she said smiling. "Giyuu? Yes, I suppose so," he said with a slight blush. It should be clarified that they were in a forest as they were on a mission, but now both sisters made Giyuu fall backwards as they were pushing him while hugging him until he fell completely. "Giyuu? Why did you do that?" he said, somewhat annoyed because it hurt to fall. "Shinobu? We want our reward," she said as she approached, as did Kanny. They both gave him a kiss, first Shinobu and then Kanny. Giyuu accepted them and that made the butterfly sisters happy. The three of them enjoyed that moment. The sisters were the happiest. But they talked for a moment and decided to hide their relationship since it would be strange to say that Giyuu was dating both of them, but now that didn't matter to them. "Hanny Shinobu? We're glad you accepted us," they said while continuing to hug him. "Giyuu? I like it too," he said while also hugging them. They were both talking until they decided it would be better to go to headquarters right away. Chapter 10. It was a new day for the pillars at headquarters. Each had their duties. A month had passed since Giyuu accepted Shinobu and Kanny's feelings. Both enjoyed being with him but were surprised by his tender side. He was attentive, affectionate, and gave them gifts. They appreciated this and told the master and the other pillars about their relationship. Needless to say, everyone was surprised and began questioning Giyuu and the butterfly sisters, but everything turned out well and everyone accepted their relationship. Right now, Giyuu was waking up in his water estate and found both sisters sleeping on either side of him. This was normal for him, as the sisters often snuck into his estate to sleep with him. Right now he was somewhat scared as both sisters were hugging him tightly, and although it didn't seem like it, they both had great physical strength, but he managed to get them to loosen their hug and gave each of them a kiss on the forehead. They both clung to him more, he also hugged them. A few minutes passed, and both woke up and gave him a kiss on both cheeks. "Hanny Shinobu? Good morning Giyuu-kun," they said happily. "Giyuu? Good morning my beautiful butterflies," he said smiling. Both sisters blushed but hid while hugging Giyuu. "Hanny? I never thought you were so romantic," she said while hugging him. "Shinobu? You're a clear example of not judging a book by its cover," she said, then leaned in to kiss him on the lips. Hanny grew somewhat jealous, and when Shinobu moved away, she kissed her on the lips. It was a rather passionate kiss, and Giyuu noticed, but simply accepted it. When they parted, they decided to get up and go about their duties as demon slayers. both sisters were eager for Giyuu's body. Ever since they had been affected by the demon's technique that altered their hormones, they hadn't stopped thinking about what it would be like to be with their beloved. But that idea would have to wait until he was no longer completely innocent. If that wasn't soon, they wouldn't be able to bear the desire they felt for him. But right now the three of them went on separate missions since the demons had been somewhat active lately, but nothing else happened. They finished their missions and received another one, all three in the same place. The three of them went and met up and found the demon, but unfortunately for the three of them, this one also altered hormones, but something stronger, and it threw it at the three of them. Giyuu was able to avoid it a little, but it affected him somewhat, but it wasn't the same for Shinobu and Kani, who were panting from how they were suffocating from the heat they felt. "Giyuu? Are they alright?" he said worriedly, after cutting off the demon's head. "Kani? That technique startled us a little, but we'll be fine, we need to go to an inn." "Shinobu? But do you have any money for the inn?" She said this because she didn't have any more money. "Kani? Just for one." "Giyuu? I don't have much," but he said hesitantly. "Shinobu? What's wrong, Giyuu-kun?" "Giyuu? I think I know this place, I remember now, this was the old village where I lived, my old house must be nearby." "Kani? Well, we're free of that problem, so we have to go." So the three of them went to Giyuu's old house. He occasionally went there to clean it, but he never noticed the village. The three arrived and decided to go to sleep. Of course, Giyuu decided to separate the rooms because both sisters were looking at him lustfully, but he didn't notice. However, the way they looked at him made him uncomfortable. The three of them went to sleep, but the two sisters, agitated, couldn't stand it and went to Giyuu. Upon seeing him, they threw themselves at him, kissing him passionately. They kissed him with great desire. Giyuu was awake and didn't know why they were like this, but he accepted their lustful kisses since he was also somewhat affected. They continued, but Kani and Shinobu left hickeys on his neck, marking their territory. Giyuu didn't stay behind and left hickeys on each of them as well. They moaned at this, but it didn't end there. Both sisters began to undress Giyuu, and he did the same until all three were naked. The sisters kissed every part of Giyuu with intense lust, and Giyuu moaned at what they were doing. Then, both sisters began to touch Giyuu's member, eventually licking and even sucking it, until Giyuu came. Both sisters drank his semen, but they didn't stop there. Giyuu wanted to take control, and he began to lick Kani, who moaned. Shinobu was being caressed by Giyuu, and both moaned with pleasure. "Kani? Giyuu-kun, why yes," she said moaning. "Shinobu? No, don't stop," she said, moaning in the same way. They remained like this for a while, until Giyuu placed his member at Kani's entrance, and she moaned at the touch. "Giyuu? Do you want me to stop?" "Kani? Just keep going," she said somewhat haltingly as she couldn't stop feeling pleasure. Giyuu inserted his member, and she moaned with pain and pleasure. Meanwhile, Shinobu felt a little jealous, but to avoid feeling that way, she placed her vagina on Kani's mouth and moved closer to Giyuu's mouth to kiss him. Kani licked Shinobu's vagina, and she began to moan. They stayed like that for a while until Giyuu was about to ejaculate, but Kani caught him by entangling her legs around him, causing him to ejaculate inside her. She only moaned and fell asleep, but Shinobu took advantage of the situation and climbed on top of Giyuu, inserting her member inside her. They stayed like that until the same thing happened and Giyuu ejaculated. All three of them then fell asleep. The next morning, Giyuu and the sisters woke up, surprised to find themselves naked. Remembering what had happened the night before, they blushed intensely. The sisters were happy to have had their first time with Giyuu, but they needed to return to headquarters. Kani and Shinobu were in a little pain and couldn't walk, blushing even more. Giyuu helped them when that happened, but nothing else occurred. They simply went to headquarters and gave their mission report, omitting what had happened. Chapter 11. It was a new day for the demon hunters, many were waking up while others were already on their missions, but we find ourselves at Mariposas' estate where the two sisters were waking up. The reason they were at their estate is because they had many patients and Giyuu was on a mission, and since it was a hard day they decided not to go to their estate and slept there. "Kani? Good morning, Shinobu," she said smiling. "Shinobu? Good morning, Ni-san, how are you?" she said cheerfully. "Kani? Something sad." "Shinobu?" Because she said hesitantly. "Kani? We couldn't go to sleep with Giyuu-kun today," she said sadly while making a small pout. "Shinobu? You know I was on a mission, we can't do anything about it," she said it normally. Both sisters got up to do their chores, and not long passed until Giyuu entered, badly injured, returning from the mission almost on the verge of fainting. "Kani?" Koino could not finish because she saw Giyuu enter and fainted, but Kani caught him in time. "Shinobu? What's wrong, Ni-san?" she said normally since she didn't see Giyuu. "Kani? Shinobu help me quickly," she said to show Giyuu, and when that happened Shinobu like lightning helped her to take Giyuu to a bed and start attending to him. The seconds ticked by, turning into minutes that then into an hour, during which Giyuu remained asleep as he was in critical condition. His wounds were very deep and he also had some broken bones, but luckily he arrived in time to be healed. "Shinobu. What do you think happened, Ni-san?" she said worriedly, letting out a few tears. "Annie? I don't know, but I think it might have been an upper moon." "Shinobu. I hope he's okay," she said while she shed tears. Both sisters stayed in that room waiting for him to wake up, but he didn't wake up until they fell asleep leaning against Giyuu's chest. The next day Giyuu woke up and saw both sisters sleeping on top of him. He smiled at how cute they looked and stroked their heads with his hands, but to his surprise, they started making a kind of purring sound that made them look even cuter. A few minutes passed and he decided to wake them up. He moved them carefully and both woke up, and upon seeing Giyuu they rushed to hug him while shedding a few small tears. "Annie Shinobu. Fool." They said it at the same time, but they were happy. "Giyuu. And why the stupid thing?" he said, somewhat offended by what they said to him. "Shinobu. Because you didn't take care of yourself, we were worried." "Giyuu. I'm sorry." "Annie. And how did you get those injuries?" "Giyuu. The mission was about killing a demon, but I was ambushed by many demons and I couldn't react in time." "Annie. That's great, we thought it was an upper moon." "Giyuu. Well, I have to go give the report to the boss." "Annie. Giyuu-kun, take care of yourself a little. You're still somewhat weak from your injuries." She said it kindly, but it was clear she was saying, "If you don't rest, I'll make you suffer." Giyuu swallowed hard and obeyed, staying to rest. But both sisters lied to him, saying he wasn't fully recovered yet, just to have him in their hands for a few moments. And so it was, because when Giyuu fell asleep, both sisters entered the room and kissed him passionately. For them, a day without Giyuu was an eternity, and now they were releasing those desires. Giyuu, being asleep, didn't realize what they were doing, and both sisters, when they finished kissing him, left to continue with their work. Time passed and Giyuu had recovered and went to give the report to the master, and not much else happened that day, and he went to the water estate to be quiet, but he was surprised to hear some small noises from his room. He became serious and opened the door just enough to see what was happening, and saw both sisters there smelling his clothes while walking around the floor. He thought it was strange and went in. "Giyuu. What's going on?" he said, not understanding. "Annie Shinobu. Guy Giyuu," they said it nervously. "Giyuu. Can you tell me what's going on?" "Annie. Well. Shinobu. No, I didn't know what to say." "Giyuu. Why are you wearing my clothes?" "Annie. To be honest, we really like your smell, and that's why we smell your clothes," she said, very embarrassed while having a big blush on her face just like Shinobu. "Giyuu. This is kind of weird," he said somewhat awkwardly. "Shinobu. Please don't think badly of us," she said with her head down in shame. "Giyuu. I would never think badly of you, but please don't do that too much." "Annie Shinobu." "Yes," they said more animatedly since he didn't think badly of them, but they threw themselves at him while kissing him all over his face. They stayed like that for a while until they decided to go to sleep. The sisters lay down on the futon next to Giyuu while the three of them hugged each other happily until they were finally asleep. Chapter 12. A new day dawned for Giyuu Tomioka, who was waking up while being embraced by the Kochou sisters. He had discovered how they wanted to smell his scent, and to do so, they sniffed his clothes. He hadn't judged them for it, but it did seem strange. He didn't dwell on it and planned to get up, but the sisters were very strong and hugged him even tighter. He knew they would never let go, so he didn't try to resist and did something he knew they would gladly accept, something that would make them release him. He stroked both their heads. They began to stir until they let go of him, while they continued sleeping. He got up, bent down, and kissed each of them on the forehead. "Giyuu. I'm happy to have them," he said, then went to make breakfast. A few minutes had passed and both sisters woke up and, not seeing Giyuu, they began to cry comically, but the noise made Giyuu run out, opening the door and began to speak. "Giyuu. What happened?" he said worriedly. "Annie Shinobu. Giyuu-kun." They shouted with excitement, then threw themselves at him while hugging him. "Giyuu. What happened?" "Annie. You scared us by not being here," she said with some tears while she had a pout on her face. "Shinobu. Don't disappear again," she said it in the same tone and with a pout. "Giyuu. Okay, but I left to make breakfast, and if you don't let me go, it's going to burn." "Annie Shinobu. Okay." So the three of them went to the dining room and Giyuu gave each of them their plate. The three of them started eating and both sisters were overjoyed because Giyuu knew how to cook very well. "Giyuu. And how is this?" "Annie. This is delicious." "Shinobu. Ni-san is right, it's very tasty." "Giyuu. I'm glad," he said happily with a smile. The three finished breakfast and went to do their chores, but both sisters were thinking about something, and it wasn't very saintly, to say the least. They had a thought about how to have a family with Giyuu, and they came to the conclusion that for that to happen they had to get pregnant by Giyuu, and they knew what they had to do for that. But they didn't pay it much attention anymore, or rather, not that much. But when they returned to headquarters to report their missions, Giyuu invited them both out. They accepted without hesitation. He took them to eat and then to a field to talk in peace. They had a good time, but on their way out they saw a child crying, and Giyuu helped him. They couldn't help but think that Giyuu would be a good father, and the idea of starting a family with Giyuu came to them again. Chapter 13. Note. Sorry for not writing part 13, but I wasn't inspired, but here it is. Right now, the hunters Kani, Shinobu and Giyuu were heading to their respective estates. Giyuu was going to his water estate and Kani and Shinobu were going to the butterfly estate, but that wasn't important. Right now, we're focusing on how Kani and Shinobu were lost in thought in their respective rooms. What were they thinking about? Well, the reason was that during their outing with Giyuu, they saw him comforting a child, and that sparked a thought. What would it be like to have a son or daughter with Giyuu, since they saw that he had a paternal instinct? And they both said. Shinobu Kani. I want a child with Giyuu, they said while turning very red because of what they said. Well, Giyuu, at his estate, felt a chill, he didn't know why, but he felt he had to be more alert, not only at night, but also during the day, even if there were no demons. Right now, the sisters were thinking about names for their possible children and already had some in mind. In Kani's case, she had 2 names in mind. If it was a boy, it would be Gichi or Sabito, since to Giyuu it would mean very good, and if it was a girl, it would be Fuji, and she was already imagining her family. In Shinobu's case, she had in mind that if it was a boy, it would be Shino, and if it was a girl, it would be Yuu, and like her sister, she was imagining her family. Right now, Giyuu felt even more afraid, not knowing what would happen. He didn't want to leave his estate under any circumstances, but that would only make things worse, since both sisters had already made up their minds. They were going to have Giyuu's child no matter what, and if that meant raping him, they would do it to have it. Get ready for the Fs. It was nighttime, and Giyuu was going to sleep, but first he was going to drink some tea he had left in the kitchen. He didn't know that the sisters had put a liquid in it that would make him sleepy, but at the same time, it was a bit of an aphrodisiac. Not knowing this, he drank it and then went to his futon, but he felt strange. He felt much more tired, but his body was somewhat warm. He didn't know what was happening, but at that moment the sisters entered. Hani. Ara Giyuu-kun, are you feeling alright? She said, smiling mischievously. Shinobu. What's wrong? She said again with a mischievous tone. Giyuu. What are you doing here? He said, trying to maintain his sanity, but it was difficult. Hani. Well, Giyuu-kun, my sister and I have made a decision. Shinobu. We've thought about it a lot and. Shinobu Kani. We want to have your child. Upon saying that, both sisters rushed towards Giyuu and began kissing him, but this did not make Giyuu nervous. Instead, thanks to the aphrodisiac, he began to like the sisters and started accepting the kisses they gave him. They continued like this for a few moments until they moved on to something more serious. All 3 were now without clothes. Kani was the first. She got on top of Giyuu and placed his member in her intimacy. At first it started to hurt, but that pain was replaced by pleasure. She wasn't thinking about what she was doing, just like Giyuu. They were just doing it. Kani did it because she wanted a child and Giyuu because of the aphrodisiac. They were like that for a while until Giyuu finished, coming inside Kani. She let out a loud moan and fell asleep, but Shinobu, who was watching, didn't wait a minute longer and also got on top of Giyuu. Shinobu. It's my turn, Giyuu-kun, she said mischievously. They didn't wait another minute and started doing it. The pleasure was so intense that they didn't even stop to rest until the same thing happened with Giyuu finishing inside Shinobu. The 2 sisters were happy. With some luck, they could get pregnant by Giyuu. Now the 3 of them were sleeping, each dreaming very different things, but none of them were bad dreams. They were all very good dreams. In Kani's dream, she was sitting in a chair watching 2 children in a courtyard. One was a girl who looked just like her and the other looked just like Giyuu. The difference was that each had different eyes. The girl had Giyuu's eyes and the boy had Kani's. She watched this with a big smile, but next to her was Giyuu, also smiling. This made her even happier. In Shinobu's dream, she was training Kanao. Note. I forgot to mention that Kanao was there, but a child was also training with him. He was a copy of Giyuu, but he had some purple tips in Shinobu's eyes. Giyuu was also there, helping them, which made her happy. And Giyuu was just sleeping, he didn't have any particular dream, but he was happy to have Shinobu and Kani by his side and not feel alone, but right now what they had around them didn't matter to them, they slept while happily hugging each other. The next morning they were getting up while getting changed. Hani. You were a bit rough, Giyuu, she said, blushing. Giyuu. Sorry, he said, somewhat embarrassed. Shinobu. It doesn't matter, this is what we wanted anyway, she said smiling. Annie Shinobu. We hope we can have a family with you, they said smiling. Chapter 14. Love is a rather strange feeling, since you never really know if you have it. Many say it's like feeling like you're in heaven or having butterflies in your stomach, but neither is the answer. Love is a feeling that arrives without us even realizing it, but that feeling becomes known when we commit acts that demonstrate our desire to be with the other person. That was the case with Kani Kochou and Shinobu Kochou. They never thought they would feel anything for the water pillar, Giyuu Tomioka, and that was proven when the three of them had their union. 2 weeks had passed since their last time together, during which Kani and Shinobu experienced dizziness and nausea when they ate, and now they were having a serious conversation with the master. Boss. This news has surprised my children, he said somewhat seriously. Giyuu. We are sorry Oyakata-sama for what happened. If there is a punishment, I will be the one to bear that punishment, he said seriously, with the intention of protecting Shinobu and Kani. Kani Shinobu. Giyuu, they whispered, surprised but happy to see how he would risk everything just to make sure they were okay. Master. Calm down, my son, there will be no punishment. In fact, I'm glad to hear you decided to start a family, but this leaves the 2 pillars out of missions, so it would be considered the elimination of 2 pillars, he said calmly but worriedly. Nobody said anything, they just waited nervously for the boss's decision. He knew it wouldn't be someone who would ask for punishment for Kani and Shinobu because of their pregnancy, but in Giyuu's case, it was unknown. Master. Sai, I won't deny that what you did was wrong, but I won't deny that asking you to risk your lives to kill demons is selfish of me and doesn't allow you to live a normal life in peace. You can have children like a normal family, but once you give birth you will have to return to your duties as hunters, but less frequently so that you have time with your children. When he finished speaking, the 3 pillars were happy. They had an opportunity to have a family. They thanked him before leaving for the butterfly farm. When the 2 sisters arrived, they hugged each other tightly while shedding some tears of happiness. This was due to Giyuu's near sacrifice to ensure Kani and Shinobu's well-being. Kani. Thank you very much, Giyuu-kun. Shinobu. You're the best thing that's ever happened to us, she said while still shedding a few tears. Giyuu. I would never let them hurt you or my children inside you, he said, returning the sisters' hug. Thus began the journey for the Kochou Tomioka family. Giyuu took the sisters to their room to rest a little, as they had started to feel dizzy. Before leaving, he kissed them both on the forehead, making them fall asleep with a smile. He was called on a mission to kill a number of demons that threatened a village. He went and completed it without any problem. Time skipped 4 months. During that time, Giyuu went on fewer missions to attend to his women. Before that time passed, Giyuu married both women so that they would be well and their children wouldn't be anything like a mistake. But in his sincere words, during that time he had some problems with the sisters because of their constant mood swings and how they seemed to feel bad at the slightest mistake, in addition to their constant cravings. More than once he ran out of money. Right now he was in the room with the sisters, both fast asleep, their heads resting on Giyuu's lap with a big smile on his face. He was smiling too, glancing at his 2 wives' bellies. If it were up to his innocence, he'd say they were round, but he knew his son or daughter was there and he wouldn't allow them to be harmed. Anyone who dared to do anything to them would feel hell itself. But he was surprised to hear his wives talking in their sleep. Kani. Giyuu-kun, don't go any further, someone might see us, she said as a little saliva came out of her mouth. Hito Giyuu, upon hearing that, didn't know what she meant, but he stroked her head because she was moving a lot, but his surprise increased when he heard Shinobu. Shinobu. Giyuu-kun, keep going, give me another child, she said sleepily while blushing slightly. Giyuu felt a little uncomfortable hearing those things, but he let it go. At that moment he wanted them to be okay no matter what. Giyuu. Rest well, my dear butterflies, he said, caressing the heads of his wives, and they snuggled closer and smiled broadly. Chapter 15. Right now we see Giyuu watching as his 2 wives were sleeping very deeply. He did nothing but calmly watch them as they slept. Giyuu never thought about having a family. Since losing his loved ones, he didn't want to get attached to anyone, always thinking they would die because of him. But finally, he found the peace he needed, and he found it with the love the Kochou sisters gave him. He knew he owed them a lot for being with him, and now even more for letting him have a family with him. His sisters were now his greatest treasure, one he didn't want to lose for any reason, but he knew that would be a very complicated, if not impossible, goal. He knew the risks of the hunter missions, and that if they had to fight Muzan, they might lose their lives trying to kill him. He wouldn't mind dying if it meant protecting his family, but he was worried that if the battle happened, all 3 of them might die. He didn't want that, but he already had a plan. If the sisters were in danger, he would sacrifice himself for their sake. He kept thinking about it, but stopped when he heard a small moan coming from the sisters and was surprised to see tears in both of their eyes. It turned out the sisters were having a nightmare. In Kani's dream. At first, she was fine in her dream. She was at the butterfly estate with her sister, who were holding babies in their arms while she was with her husband, Giyuu. But suddenly, everything was going wrong. The whole atmosphere changed. Now there were many destroyed places, blood everywhere, the babies she was holding were gone, and there was blood. And then she saw it. A large number of demons. Some had numbers in their eyes, and another one stood in front of them all with very red eyes and slit pupils. That wasn't the most worrying thing. She saw her dead sister and her husband Giyuu with his ninjutsu on the ground, trying to support himself while he had many wounds. That scene reminded her of how her family died because of a demon. In Shinobu's dream. She was going through the same experience as her sister, but she was being devoured by a demon, and her husband could do nothing to help her. End of dreams. Outside, Giyuu was watching, worried by how they were crying. He didn't know how to calm them down, so he picked them up to stop them from dreaming about what was happening to them. When both sisters got up, very agitated by the nightmare, they were sweating on their faces while they had some tears, but they turned around and saw their husband Giyuu with a worried face. Annie Shinobu. Giyuu-kun, both sisters shouted upon seeing Giyuu safe as they rushed towards him to hug him. Giyuu didn't know what to do. The sisters' embrace was sudden, but he returned the hug because he didn't want to see them in that state. Giyuu? What happened? Why were they crying? He asked, very worried. Annie. I saw Snipko how you died, Snip, Kanny said while crying. Shino. It was the same Snip, she said, crying a lot. Upon hearing that, Giyuu hugged them tighter to calm them down. Giyuu? Don't cry anymore, I will always be there for you no matter what, he said calmly, so that both sisters would stop crying. Annie and Shinobu stopped crying when they heard Giyuu's calm voice. They stopped crying and hugged him tighter. They didn't want to separate from him under any circumstances, but they had to because they were suffocating him with their strength. 5month, time skip. At this moment we can see both sisters on stretchers, while they had a pained expression with their eyes closed. The reason was that they were giving birth to their sons or daughters, but they were not the only ones suffering, as Giyuu had a pained expression because the sisters were squeezing his hands. Owie. Come on, Kanny-sama and Shinobu-sama, push harder. Annie. That's what I'm trying to do. Shinobu. It hurts too much. Both were pushing very hard while squeezing Giyuu's hands tighter, while he tried to calm them down a little. The process lasted about 2 hours, during which the sisters screamed a lot, but all those screams stopped when they heard some baby cries. It was a boy with jet black hair with some purple tips and semi-blue and purple eyes. This was Shinobu's son. The other was a girl with jet black but straight hair with pink eyes with a slight blue tint in the pupils. This was Kanny's daughter. Giyuu was relieved for 2 reasons. First, to see his children safe and sound, and second, because his hands were not broken in the process. Owie. Congratulations, it's a boy in the case of Shinobu-sama and a girl in the case of Kanny-sama. Annie Shinobu. Can we carry them? They said in a tired tone. Owie. Sure, Kanao, give the girl to Kanny-sama. So Kanao went to give her baby to Kanny, who gladly carried her, just as Aoi went to give the child to Shinobu. Both sisters looked at their babies in their arms with a smile, and Giyuu was happy with some tears in his eyes from the happiness. Giyuu. And what names will they give them? Annie. I don't know, I thought of some names, but I'm not sure. Shinobu. It's the same thing. Giyuu. I see. Aoi. Take some time to think about that, besides, you need to rest a little. Chapter 16. 2 days have passed during which the sisters were recovering. During that time, Kanny and Shinobu had already thought of names for the babies. Kanny decided to name her daughter Tsutako in honor of Giyuu's sister, and Shinobu decided to name her son Gichi, something that pleased the raven-haired man. But returning to the present, we see Kanny taking care of Tsutako in her arms, while Shinobu's son was being looked after by Kanny and Aoi, since she was on a mission with Giyuu to kill a lower moon. The flower pillar was overjoyed for her daughter. She was beautiful in her eyes. However, she had a certain worry. If this generation failed to defeat Muzan, she would have to leave the responsibility of killing him to her daughter and her sister's son. But she didn't want that. She wanted to live a normal life with her daughter and husband. Knowing the risks, she was determined to defeat Muzan so she could have that life without demons. Meanwhile, Shinobu and Giyuu had already finished their mission to kill the demon, since it was a lower moon that had been expelled, so it didn't take them long. But Shinobu had the same doubt as her sister, but she didn't know what to do. She would take advantage of the fact that Giyuu would have to stay with her at an inn to ask him about it. When they arrived at the inn, they asked for the room and shared the same futon, but to break the silence she began to speak. Shinobu. Giyuu-kun. Giyuu. What's wrong, Shinobu? He said in a normal tone. Shinobu. Do you think we can take down Muzan? She blurted out as if it were the most normal thing in the world, but with a nervous tone. Giyuu. You're saying that because of the children, right? He said, already knowing the reason for that question. Shinobu. Yes, I don't want them to suffer in this world where there are demons. Giyuu. I don't know, Shinobu. I want you to live a normal life without demons, but we know that's complicated. Besides, we don't know anything about Muzan, and many lives will be lost if we confront him. Shinobu. So you don't trust me? She said somewhat angrily. Giyuu. I don't mean that, I mean there's a chance we'll survive and a chance we won't, but if the day comes when we face Muzan, I want you to promise me this. Shinobu. What? Giyuu. If the battle against Muzan comes, I don't want you to die and not take such risks. I want you and Kani to live to take care of the children. If I die, I don't want you to cry, and I want you to move on and live a normal life. When you said those words, Shinobu couldn't help but shed a few tears. She knew the risk of death in the final battle and that they might die trying, and yet Giyuu said that if he died, they should live without crying for him. She noticed that he cared more for others than for himself. He didn't care about losing his life as long as she and her sister were safe. She hugged him tightly, not wanting to let go. Shinobu. Please tell me you won't die. Giyuu. If there is any hope that I live to be with you, believe me, I will take advantage of it, he said, then kissed her forehead, which calmed the little pillar, and without further ado, they both fell asleep. The next day, Shinobu and Giyuu arrived at headquarters to give the report and go to the butterfly estate to see Kani and for Shinobu to spend time with Gichi. When they arrived, they greeted each other. Shinobu. Girls, we've arrived, she said, inviting the girls from the estate to greet them both. Then Kani arrived with Gichi, who was crying, which worried Shinobu. When she picked Gichi up, he began to calm down as he looked at his mother. Kani. Ara, it seems that Gichi doesn't like being with anyone other than you, Shinobu. Shinobu. It seems so, you are somewhat mean to others, but I think you got that from me, she said, lifting the baby a little, who started to laugh a little, watching Giyuu stretch out his little arms as a sign that he wanted to be held. Shinobu. Well, it seems he wants you to carry him, Giyuu. When Shinobu said that, she pulled Gichi to Giyuu, who gently picked him up so the baby started to laugh, but suddenly a baby's cry was heard. It was Tostako. Upon hearing it, the three went to see what was happening to see why she was crying from the fright Kanao had given her when she came in to see what was wrong. Pani. Kanao, what happened? Kanao. I came to see how your daughter was and suddenly she started to cry. Pani. Tsutako-chan, don't cry, she's your aunt Kanao, she said as she took her out of a crib and showed her Kanao, who then stretched out his little arms to her. Han understood the reference and passed it on to Kanao. Tsutako was looking at her aunt and then saw Giyuu and wanted to be bucked by him. Pani. It seems like they love you a lot, Giyuu. That's how I spent the day, with family and a few laughs. Chapter 17. 2 days have passed during which the sisters were recovering. During that time, Kani and Shinobu had already thought of names for the babies. Kani decided to name her daughter Tsutako in honor of Giyuu's sister, and Shinobu decided to name her son Gichi, something that pleased the raven-haired man. But returning to the present, we see Kani taking care of Tsutako in her arms, while Shinobu's son was being looked after by Kani and Aoi, since she was on a mission with Giyuu to kill a lower moon. The flower pillar was overjoyed for her daughter. She was beautiful in her eyes. However, she had a certain worry. If this generation failed to defeat Muzan, she would have to leave the responsibility of killing him to her daughter and her sister's son. But she didn't want that. She wanted to live a normal life with her daughter and husband. Knowing the risks, she was determined to defeat Muzan so she could have that life without demons. Meanwhile, Shinobu and Giyuu had already finished their mission to kill the demon, since it was a lower moon that had been expelled, so it didn't take them long. But Shinobu had the same doubt as her sister, but she didn't know what to do. She would take advantage of the fact that Giyuu would have to stay with her at an inn to ask him about it. When they arrived at the inn they asked for the room and shared the same futon, but to break the silence she began to speak. Shinobu. Giyuu-kun. Giyuu. What's wrong, Shinobu? He said in a normal tone. Shinobu. Do you think we can take down Muzan? She blurted out as if it were the most normal thing in the world, but with a nervous tone. Giyuu. You're saying that because of the children, right? He said, already knowing the reason for that question. Shinobu. Yes, I don't want them to suffer in this world where there are demons. Giyuu. I don't know, Shinobu. I want you to live a normal life without demons, but we know that's complicated. Besides, we don't know anything about Muzan, and many lives will be lost if we confront him. Shinobu. So you don't trust me? She said somewhat angrily. Giyuu. I don't mean that, I mean there's a chance we'll survive and a chance we won't, but if the day comes when we face Muzan, I want you to promise me this. Shinobu. What? Giyuu. If the battle against Muzan comes, I don't want you to die and not take such risks. I want you and Kani to live to take care of the children. If I die, I don't want you to cry, and I want you to move on and live a normal life. When you said those words, Shinobu couldn't help but shed a few tears. She knew the risk of death in the final battle and that they might die trying, and yet Giyuu said that if he died, they should live without crying for him. She noticed that he cared more for others than for himself. He didn't care about losing his life as long as she and her sister were safe. She hugged him tightly, not wanting to let go. Shinobu. Please tell me you won't die. Giyuu. If there is any hope that I live to be with you, believe me, I will take advantage of it, he said, then kissed her forehead, which calmed the little pillar, and without further ado, they both fell asleep. The next day, Shinobu and Giyuu arrived at headquarters to give the report and go to the butterfly estate to see Kani and for Shinobu to spend time with Gichi. When they arrived, they greeted each other. Shinobu. Girls, we've arrived, she said, inviting the girls from the estate to greet them both. Then Kani arrived with Gichi, who was crying, which worried Shinobu. When she picked Gichi up, he began to calm down as he looked at his mother. Kani. Ara, it seems that Gichi doesn't like being with anyone other than you, Shinobu. Shinobu. It seems so, you are somewhat mean to others, but I think you got that from me, she said, lifting the baby a little, who started to laugh a little, watching Giyuu stretch out his little arms as a sign that he wanted to be held. Shinobu. Well, it seems he wants you to carry him, Giyuu. When Shinobu said that, she pulled Gichi to Giyuu, who gently picked him up so the baby started to laugh, but suddenly a baby's cry was heard. It was Tostako. Upon hearing it, the three went to see what was happening to see why she was crying from the fright Kanao had given her when she came in to see what was wrong. Kanao, what happened? Kanao. I came to see how your daughter was and suddenly she started to cry. Tsutako-chan, don't cry, she's your aunt Kanao, she said as she took her out of a crib and showed her Kanao, who then stretched out his little arms to her. Han understood the reference and passed it on to Kanao. Tsutako was looking at her aunt and then saw Giyuu and wanted to be bucked by him. It seems like they love you a lot, Giyuu. That's how I spent the day, with family and a few laughs. Chapter 18. We found ourselves at an inn where some Kakushins were tending to the flower and insect pillars after the fight with Upper Moon 2. They were in serious condition from the fight as the demon had dealt them very strong blows. If it weren't for the water pillar, they wouldn't be alive. But the water pillar, or rather Giyuu, wasn't at ease. He was blaming himself for not arriving much sooner. If he had arrived earlier, his wives wouldn't be in that state. Giyuu. Why wasn't I faster? Why am I so weak? It's my fault they're in this state, the pillar thought sadly as he grabbed his head in fury. At this moment, he didn't know what to do. First his sister and then his friend, he didn't want to lose his wives, although he still had his children he didn't want them to grow up without a mother, but his thoughts were interrupted by Aoi who left the room with a calm look. Aoi. Water pillar, Kani-sama and Shinobu-sama are out of danger, you can rest easy, she said with a smile before leaving. Giyuu, without wasting any time, entered the room and saw his wives lying in beds while they slept. Giyuu. Forgive me, if I had arrived a little earlier you wouldn't be in this state, it's my fault for being so weak, he said while crying a little, but he heard something that pulled him out of his sadness. Kani. Don't feel bad, Giyuu-kun, it wasn't your fault, she said with a smile. Shinobu. Yes, my sister and I don't blame you, in fact we're grateful you came, otherwise we'd be dead by now, she said, still smiling. Giyuu couldn't resist and gave them a hug, which both sisters gladly accepted. Time passed and Giyuu had to leave so they could rest. As Giyuu left, the sisters began to talk. Kani. I'm worried, she said, sounding a little scared. Shinobu. I know, Nisan, Giyuu-kun keeps blaming himself for what happened to him. If this continues, he'll probably end up dying for us without caring about himself. Kani. I know, Shinobu, but there's nothing we can do to make him feel better about himself, she said worriedly. The two sisters finished their conversation when they noticed some pillars entering the room to check on them. Not much else happened and then everyone left, though they didn't know what Giyuu would have to do, something that might cost him his life. Giyuu had been sent on a mission from a demon in the snowy mountains. Knowing that his wives would be alright, he went as fast as he could to the mountains, without any worries. He saw how a girl turned into a demon was on top of a boy who was trying to defend himself with an axe that prevented the demon from getting any closer. Without wasting any time, Giyuu leaped forward and was about to cut off the girl's head, but the red-haired boy pushed her aside, taking him with him. However, Giyuu managed to cut off a little of his hair. The boy was Tanjiro Kamado. Giyuu. Why are you protecting her? He asked seriously as he looked at the boy. Tanjiro. A katana? He asked, confused. Giyuu. Because you protect her. Tanjiro. She's my sister, she's my younger sister, he said with some fear. Giyuu. Is that your sister? He asked, watching as the girl tried to get away while making strange noises. Tanjiro. Yes. Suddenly Giyuu went straight to the boy who was crouching down with his sister, but he realized that he no longer had her and saw Giyuu holding her. Tanjiro. Nezuko. Giyuu. "Don't move, my job is to kill demons, I'll cut off your sister's head," he said seriously. Tanjiro. "Wait, Nezuko didn't kill anyone. There was a strange smell in my house, like someone unknown. Maybe that smell was from whoever killed everyone there, but it wasn't Nezuko. I don't know why she transformed, but he said, his voice a mixture of despair and fear. Giyuu. That's simple, he transformed because demon blood entered his wounds, that's how demons multiply, he said, still looking at Tanjiro. Tanjiro. Nezuko would never devour a human. Giyuu. Well, I don't think so, a moment ago I was about to devour you. Tanjiro. That's not true, she still recognizes me, I'm sure of it, I won't let her hurt anyone, and I'll make her human again, I swear I'll heal her, he said, already on the verge of total despair at seeing Giyuu still with his sister. Giyuu. There's no cure, a demon can't become human again, he said simply, looking at the boy. Tanjiro. Then I won't rest until I find a way, but please, I beg you not to kill her. I'm going to find the one who killed my whole family. I'm going to fix all of this. Please, I beg you, don't do it. He finished shouting as he saw Giyuu start to move his katana, but he got to the ground and bowed down. Tanjiro. I beg you, please don't kill my sister, he said a little more calmly, I implore you, he said sadly as he began to cry a little. Giyuu. Don't humiliate yourself like this to give your enemies the opportunity to kill you, he said, making Tanjiro stand up and look at him. All you're doing is making yourself vulnerable. If that had any success, your family would still be alive. Giyuu. And you think a weakling like you would find a way to cure your sister or look for a demon? Don't be ridiculous. Giyuu. Weak people have no rights, they can't make decisions, all they do is get mercilessly crushed by the strong. Perhaps the demons know a way to cure your sister, maybe, but don't get your hopes up that any of them will grant you that wish, just as I don't grant you respect, that's the reality. Giyuu. And why the hell did you jump on top of her? Was that your way of protecting her? Why didn't you throw the axe at her? And how could you turn your back on me? Those mistakes are what led to her capture. I could have impaled you both and ended it all. Giyuu. Don't cry, don't despair, this isn't the time. I know very well that you're devastated. They killed your family, and your sister is now a demon. It's hard. You want to scream. I understand. If I had arrived noon earlier, your family might still be alive. But there's no way to turn back time. Be angry. The anger of being unable to forgive will be what drives you to act. Giyuu. A weak resolve will not allow you to protect or heal your sister, nor avenge your family, he thought, then plunged his sword into Nezuko. The same thing happened as in the original story where Giyuu left Nezuko alive and told Tanjiro to go to Urakadaki. Chapter 19. 2 years had passed, and Kani and Shinobu were worried about Giyuu because he had been acting a little strange since that mission. They tried to find out about it, but he wanted to avoid it a little, and so a week went by until he asked them something strange for the sisters. He asked them if there was any demon that was good. That question surprised the sisters, but they decided to answer. In Kani's case, she said she thought some demons could be good, but Shinobu replied that she didn't believe there could be a good demon. Giyuu knew they would answer differently, so he decided to change the subject, and that's how it was for 2 years, until Giyuu and Shinobu were sent on the same mission as in the original story. We focus on the part where Giyuu defended Tanjiro and Nezuko from Shinobu. When Giyuu blocked Shinobu's sword, he stood in front of the siblings, something that surprised Shinobu. Shinobu. Why are you defending them, Giyuu-kun? The boy has a demon and he has to die, she said somewhat seriously. Giyuu. Do you remember the question I asked you and Kani 2 years ago? He said seriously. Shinobu. So there was a good demon? Don't tell me that girl is the demon you were referring to, she said, very surprised. You see, he said, somewhat worried about the reaction she would have. Shinobu. Giyuu-kun, you know that Kani and I trust you, but this is difficult, and even if we accept it, the other pillars and the master wouldn't. Giyuu. I have a plan to make them leave Tanjiro and his sister alone. I saw how she didn't eat anyone, and in case she does. Shinobu. Don't you dare do that, she said, holding back tears. Giyuu. I intend to give my life so that the punishment is paid, he said seriously, and Shinobu couldn't help but shed a tear. She accepted it, and with the help of Kanao who also went, they took Tanjiro and Nezuko along with their friends. Back at headquarters, all the pillars were gathered, each with a different look in their eyes, while Giyuu stood apart from the others, and Kani and Shinobu looked worried. The entire meeting unfolded just like in the original story, including Nezuko's test. But right now Giyuu was being looked down upon by the pillars. Some understood the situation, but others were angry and did not accept it, but they would obey the master's request. Then Giyuu went to the butterfly estate just to visit Tanjiro and the others. He didn't know whether to talk to Shinobu and Kani, because after the meeting they were looking at him strangely, so he didn't want to talk to them. Once at the farm, he only saw how they were and was determined to leave. Near the entrance, he was pulled into a room, more specifically the room Kani and Shinobu shared. When he was pulled in and saw more clearly, he saw both sisters with a sad look, asking for an explanation. "Annie. Giyuu-kun, tell us why," he said with his head bowed. "Giyuu? Why what?" he said somewhat seriously. "Shinobu. Tell us why you never told us about that demon," she said, bringing up the subject as she was somewhat angry and scared that something might happen to Giyuu. "Giyuu. When I saw the girl, I was going to kill her, but the boy protected her. I didn't understand why. I knocked him unconscious to kill the girl, but she pushed me away. I thought I was going to kill the boy, but she protected him." As she said that, the sisters were crying a little. Their husband may have been a hunter, but he had a heart for the two of them. "Annie. But why didn't you tell us?" "Giyuu. I didn't want to involve them in this. If I told them and they kept it to themselves, they'd be in trouble too. I didn't want them to be in danger," he said calmly. "Besides, I thought they'd hate me for what I did." Upon hearing that, Kani and Shinobu couldn't bear it and hugged him tightly. They were afraid. Their husband cared so much for them that he didn't think about himself. That was one of the reasons they fell in love with him. He was always careful with others. "Annie. We've told you we'll never hate you," she said with a smile, wiping away her tears. "Shinobu. Ni-san is right, we will never hate you," she said, giving him a kiss on the lips. Kani didn't stay behind and gave him one too. Right now Kani and Shinobu along with Giyuu were going to see the three they rescued. One was Tanjiro, another was a blonde-haired boy with orange tips who was drooling at the butterfly sisters. Both sisters disliked that blonde boy, but Giyuu put his killer instinct on him so that he would stop looking at them. Finally, the blonde boy stopped looking at them and the sisters mentally thanked Giyuu. The other boy was nowhere to be seen because his head was covered by a boar's head. "Shinobu. It seems his condition is still bad," she said with a smile. "Annie. What we're going to do is her recovery training," she said cheerfully. Everyone nodded, but the blonde boy named Zenitsu kept staring at the sisters because in his opinion, they were angels. He wanted to make one of them his wife because he wanted to get married before he died. Poor guy, he doesn't know the girls were already married. Already in a room were two girls who were Kanao and Aoi who were waiting for them for training. Everything happened just like the original story, except that Giyuu was present while sending killing intent to Zenitsu for seeing his wives. Chapter 20. Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and Inosuke's training was just ending, but then two children ran in to hug Kani and Shinobu. "Shinobu. Gichi-kun, I told you not to enter when he's training." "Kani. Don't worry Shinobu, remember that Gichi-kun and Tsutako-chan can't be without us and Giyuu-kun for too long," she said smiling, and the three hunters looked at that with curiosity, and Zenitsu looked at that worried. "Tanjiro. Excuse me, Shinobu-sama and Kani-sama, but who are the children?" he said as the children, upon hearing him, hid behind their mothers. "Annie. Oh, that's right, Kamado-kun, there are children, the girl is mine, and the boy is Shinobu-chan," she said smiling, but Tanjiro noticed that child looked a little like Giyuu. "Tanjiro. Excuse me, but who is the father?" "The child looks like Tomioka-san," he said doubtfully, while Zenitsu was in tears. "Shinobu. Well the boy is Giyuu-kun's and the girl too," she said, smiling slightly and blushing. Silence reigned in the room. It was understood that Shinobu's child was Giyuu's, but that the girl was also his, but with a different mother was even more surprising. "Zenitsu. What? How's it that he has a child with you?" he shouted with a face of extreme surprise equal to a comical face that scared the children who started to cry, and suddenly Giyuu grabbed Zenitsu's head. "Giyuu. Listen Agatsuma, if you scare my children again I swear I'll rip your head off," he said with a colder look and unleashing a murderous instinct that greatly frightened Tanjiro, Inosuke and Zenitsu, but to the others, it conveyed warmth and protection. Annie and Shinobu were smiling because their husband protected them and their children very well. The blonde man kept staring at them, which made them uncomfortable, so they thanked him. The children were calm and went to Giyuu to calm him down, since they knew their father would do anything to protect them, even kill someone who hurt them. That's why they went to calm him down. "Bitchy. Tutu-chan, see calm down," he said nervously because he was something like that, he didn't talk much, only with his parents and sister. "Tsutako. Yes Tu-chan, calm down or you'll hurt him," said a sobered Tsutako to her father, who began to lower Zenitsu who was more than scared, while he turned to look at his children with a warm smile. "Inosuke. I will be strong, but I will never mess with the half-half Gunpachiro Haori," he whispered to Tanjiro. "Tanjiro. First, my name is Tanjiro and this is Tomioka, and for the first time I support you on that," he said, also whispering, as he watched Giyuu leave with his children, since they wanted to spend time with him. "Annie. He is very protective," she said, smiling. "Shinobu. You know how it is," she said, smiling back. "Tanjiro. He's always like this," he said incredulously, as did Inosuke, who couldn't speak. "Annie. Yes, he's always like that when someone hurts us," she said, smiling. "Shinobu. He is our husband since the three of us have that relationship." Zenitsu? How is it that you are his wives? He said incredulously while saddened by the loss of another opportunity to have a wife. Shinobu? Yes, Agatsuma-san, he is our husband. Annie? Is there a problem with that? She said, causing a purple aura to envelop both sisters, who had a serious expression. Zenitsu? And no problem, he said, trembling with fear as the sisters no longer had their auras. When everything was over, Kani and Shinobu decided to go to their children's room. When they entered, they saw something enchanting. Giyuu was sitting while Tsutako braided his hair and Gichi was on top of his head, putting a flower crown on him. Annie? They seem to be having fun, she said, smiling. Shinobu? They're not going to say hello, she said, feigning pain. Upon hearing that, Tsutako and Gichi ran to their mothers and gave them a somewhat frightened hug. Shinobu? There, Gichi, we're not upset, she said as she kissed her son on the forehead, who blushed with embarrassment. Annie? You too, Tsutako, don't feel like that, she said as she lifted her into her arms. Tsutako? Moo, don't be like that, Kachan, she said while pouting. Ichi? The same as Tsutako ni-san, he said in the same way, pouting. The room was filled with laughter because of the two children's antics as they made their parents laugh. But then someone entered the room. Kanao and Aoi, who felt left out of the family. Tsutako? Kanao ni, Aoi ni, Tu-chan and Kachan are mean to us, she said as she left with them, as did Gichi. Kanao was holding Gichi in her arms. Thanks to those children, she could be a little more expressive. Everything was fun in that room while the three hunters listened to that. Tanjiro and Inosuke didn't care much, although the news that the three of them were a couple still lingered in their minds. But in Zenitsu's case, he was still crying over what happened and was very afraid of Giyuu, but according to his words, he still had his Nezuko-chan. The poor guy doesn't know what will happen. But now Giyuu is being sent on a mission to kill a demon, but it wasn't easy for him to leave, as his children clung to him and wouldn't let go. Kani and Shinobu had to pull them away. Returning to Giyuu, he was supposed to go on a mission to the red light district, but something happened. The mission was supposed to be with Yuzui, but now he was on another mission, so his wife would have to go with him, leaving the children with Kanao, Aoi, and the other girls. They just prayed that the children wouldn't do anything to them, because even though they were kind, they tended to be very hyperactive. Chapter 21. Giyuu was recently sent on a mission to the red light district, but his wives, upon learning where he would have to go, became jealous and decided to go with him, leaving their children in the care of Kanao and Aoi and the girls. Both sisters had a thought. If he looked at another woman, he would suffer greatly and might not be able to walk again for a while. But getting back to what they were doing, they arrived and Giyuu decided it would be good for them to move around on the rooftops and look for suspicious activity. Kani and Shinobu agreed. It was better than going on the ground where, according to them, there were many husband stealers. While on the rooftops they saw many people walking, but some were using umbrellas to shield themselves from the sun and those people were heading towards an alley. As night fell, Giyuu stared intently at the suspects, but Kani and Shinobu noticed that it was a woman. They didn't know if she was the demon, but jealousy was winning over their common sense until the demon who had a female appearance attacked a man and was about to kill him. Giyuu gave her a cut that sent her flying. Kani and Shinobu came to their senses and went to help Giyuu. The demon had many needles in her fingers and a number 1 in one eye. It was the lower moon one that was at a mid-level of upper moon, that's why Giyuu couldn't cut off its head. Demon. Damned ones, let me eat so I can get stronger, he said, charging at Giyuu who was waiting for him, but Shinobu stabbed him, injecting poison, and Kani cut off part of his neck and Giyuu quickly cut off his head. Despite being a moon, he was very trusting and didn't go all out, so the three of them finished him off quickly, but the sisters couldn't stop being jealous. The three were going to a wisteria inn near the red light district. Giyuu was calm, but the sisters were burning with jealousy. When they arrived, they asked for a room. There were 3 futons, and each of them lay down on one, but Kani and Shinobu got up and lay down on Giyuu's futon and hugged him possessively with some force that woke Giyuu up. Giyuu? What's going on? He said calmly, since he had gotten used to the two of them. Kani? Because you were staring at that demon so much, she said while hiding her face. Shinobu? Tell us the truth. Giyuu? Remember that it was a mission and we had to be attentive to everything, also remember that I only have eyes for you, my dear butterflies, he said smiling, and the sisters blushed as they hugged him tighter. Kani Shinobu? Prove it, they said without showing their faces. Giyuu? Huh? He said, confused because he didn't understand what they were referring to. Kani? Giyuu-kun, show us that you love us, she said, looking at him with a blush. Shinobu? Tonight, right now, show us how much you love us, she said, looking at him with a blush. Giyuu understood what they were saying and just nodded with a blush. Since they had Tsutako and Gichi, they hadn't been able to have any intimacy because of them and the missions, but this was the moment they had alone. The sisters, seeing him nod, quickly gave him a kiss. First, Kani, who was very lustful at that moment, put her tongue in without wasting any time, which Giyuu accepted. Then Shinobu was kissing Giyuu's neck, making him let out some moans while he kissed Kani. Lemon skipped. The sisters were happy and then changed to go to headquarters and give their report. Chapter 22. The three hunters were going to the butterfly farm to rest from the mission since the night had left them exhausted, especially the girls who were limping a little. When they arrived at the farm they were greeted by their children who hugged them tightly, and then the other people on the farm welcomed them, but they noticed something, it was that Kanao was somewhat red, this surprised the sisters, and they had a thought. It was that Kanao had found her son, but they had doubts about who it was, but they wouldn't pay attention to it for the moment. After a few moments everyone was resting, but they saw in the distance how Kanao was smiling while she was talking openly with Tanjiro, which surprised and delighted her sisters. After some time, plans were made to resume the rehabilitation training of the three hunters, but Zenitsu no longer had his sight set on the butterfly sisters, as he knew he would die if he did. But now Kanao and Aoi felt Zenitsu's gaze on them, something that disgusted them because first he went after their older sisters, and now he wanted to be with them. As training was ending, Aoi was walking, but Zenitsu stood in front of him. Zenitsu? Hey beautiful, what are you doing all alone? He said with a somewhat silly smile. Aoi. What do you want? She said somewhat annoyed upon seeing him, since in her opinion he was a kind of womanizer. Zenitsu? I just wanted to ask you, please marry me, I might die on a mission he shouted, making Aoi cover her ears. Aoi. What's wrong with you, you damn womanizer? I'm not going to be with you she said angrily, leaving without looking at Zenitsu. After what happened, Zenitsu threw a tantrum because of Aoi's rejection, but in his mind he still had his Nezuko-chan and Kanao. As long as one of them loved him, he would be happy. But unfortunately for him, he saw Kanao talking openly with Tanjiro, while with him she was curt. He only had Nezuko left and waited until nightfall so he could be with her. As night fell, Zenitsu went to retrieve Nezuko's box, but what he saw completely devastated him. There was Nezuko talking to Michiro Takedo, the mist pillar, who was smiling at Nezuko. They were so friendly that they didn't notice his presence, then Zenitsu ran away with comical tears, but in the distance he saw Kani walking with Giyuu, and without caring about dying, he went to give Kani a hug, but his head was grabbed by Giyuu who had a gloomy look. Giyuu? What were you trying to do, Agatsuma? He said seriously while clutching his head. Kani was behind Giyuu, somewhat afraid, because despite being a pillar, the blonde boy scared her with his idiotic and perverted expression. Giyuu? Answer me, Agatsuma, why did you speak to my wife like that? He said very seriously. Zenitsu? Leave me alone, she's probably with you out of pity, and she wants me, a gentleman he said with fear and some confidence. As he said that, Giyuu's hair covered his eyes, his murderous instinct rising towards Zenitsu, who was trembling even more with fear, and Giyuu's hand was squeezing his head much tighter. Kani? That's not true, my sister and I love Giyuu-kun, besides, we don't like you she said, somewhat disgusted by Zenitsu. After hearing Kani's words, Giyuu calmed down a little and left Zenitsu on the ground, but still showing his murderous instinct, then looked at him with his blue eyes, that seemed to kill your soul. Giyuu? Listen Agatsuma, I don't want you saying that to my wives again, and even less do I want you approaching them with any intentions, other than healing your wounds he said angrily as he left with Kani, who was blushing. She knew that Giyuu wasn't saying it because of Toxico, but because he wanted to protect her from him, which is why she was blushing as she left with Giyuu. The two of them went to sleep in their room, they slept in the same bed to be together, literally the three of them hugging in the same bed. The next morning everyone got up to do their recovery training, but the moment Zenitsu entered the room he looked lovingly at Aoi and Kanao. He knew he couldn't approach the girls because of Giyuu's threat, so he decided to try to win the hearts of the two little butterflies, but to his surprise, they already had someone chosen to help them. In Kanao's case, she was helping Tanjiro with his training. In Aoi's case, she was going to help Inosuke, which is why he stayed with the three girls. During the cup test and when they were trapped, Kani and Shinobu were going to help, but under Giyuu's cold gaze. That training session was the most uncomfortable for Zenitsu, but he thought he could be with his Nezuko-chan. Once training was over, everyone went about their business. Giyuu went to spend some time with his children, as he hadn't been able to spend much time with them due to missions, so he would take care of them today. Kani was going on a mission, Shinobu was helping the wounded, and the others were busy with their own unimportant things. Chapter 23. A month had passed since Rengoku's train mission took place. Luckily for everyone, Giyuu had a mission nearby and was able to save Kaijuro from the upper moon 3 before it killed him. However, they realized they had to train more to defeat the other moons. But something strange was also happening. The wind pillar's behavior. Tsunemi Shinazagawa had been acting very strangely with Kani. He was very close to her, both on missions and at meetings that the boss requested. He was extremely close. At first, no one paid much attention to it since Sanemi was a good friend of Kanny, but everything went to very extremes. They are currently on a mission that they quickly completed in a town not very populated by people, but they didn't know that Giyuu was spying on them since he had a bad feeling, and he was right. Taking advantage of the fact that it was night, Sanemi grabbed Kanny and took her to a dark alley while covering her mouth. Sanemi. Hahaha, I was already waiting for this moment Kanny-chan, he said looking at her lustfully, and Kanny was able to take Sanemi's hand away from her mouth, but that caused him to corner her with no way out. Kanny. What is Shinazagawa doing? She said, frightened. Sanemi. Isn't it obvious? I intend to make you mine. I don't like that stupid Tomioka married you, so I'll mark you, he said angrily and was about to kiss Kanny while groping her. Kanny. And no, let me go, you damn madman, don't touch me, he said, scared, tears streaming down his face. Everything seemed lost from Kanny's perspective, but Sanemi was sent flying by a blow he received, causing him to release Kanny and Giyuu to catch her. Sanemi. What the hell, he said angrily. Giyuu. What do you think you're doing, you bastard? He said angrily as Kanny hugged him while crying from fear. Sanemi. Well, what else could I do but make her mine, but you got in the way, he said, taking out his ninchurito to go straight to Giyuu, who also took out his ninchurito and defended himself, along with Kanny who was still in shock. The battle was tough for Giyuu because he couldn't attack while defending Kanny, but luckily for him, Shinobu, who also had a bad feeling, injected Sanemi with paralyzing poison. Shinobu. You bastard, you dared to try to grape my sister, you're crazy. She said angrily. Sanemi. I don't care, she belongs to me, he said angrily as he fell from the poison. Giyuu. Shinobu, take Kanny with you, I'll take care of Sanemi, Kanny needs your help now, he said seriously, and Shinobu nodded and took her sister who was already coming out of shock. Giyuu. You're a damn Shinazagawa, I understood the reason for your character, but this is crossing the line, you were about to grape my wife, he said angrily approaching and punching Sanemi in the nose, drawing blood. Sanemi. You're a bastard, she was supposed to be with me, but you came along and ruined everything, he said angrily, trying to move, but Giyuu grabbed his hair and hit him repeatedly, leaving him with a black eye. Then he kneed him in the stomach, knocking the wind out of him and causing him to spit out blood. Then Giyuu hit him on the back of the neck, knocking him unconscious. Giyuu. You're trash, Sanemi. I used to admire you, but I'll make sure you get punished, he said coldly as he dragged Sanemi to headquarters. When he arrived, he introduced himself to the boss and explained everything Sanemi had done, along with Kanny's testimony, who was hugging Giyuu, very scared. The boss was very disappointed. He would have to remove him from the organization, but it wouldn't be good to lose such a good fighting pillar, so he sent hunters to beat Sanemi as punishment. We are now at the butterfly estate where Giyuu arrived with a worried expression next to Kanny who fell asleep from exhaustion. He then took her to his room and laid her down on a bed so she would be calm, but she began to move fearfully while saying Giyuu's name. Kanny. Giyuu, please help me, she said sleepily, while Shinobu also entered to see her sister like this. She and Giyuu got into bed, hugging Kanny, who calmed down and they began to sleep. The next day everyone woke up. The pillars received the news of what Sanemi had done and felt disgusted by it, but the one who was the worst was Kanny, who woke up scared. But a hug and a kiss from Giyuu calmed her down and she returned to normal. Then, seeing her daughter come in worry cheered her up even more, seeing that she wasn't alone at that moment. The rest of the day Kanny rested to recover from what had happened, while Giyuu, along with Shinobu and the other pillars, comforted her. Nezuko, who had gone out at night, hugged her to reassure her, and Kanny saw one of the reasons why Giyuu had protected the girl. Chapter 24. It was a new day at the hunter's headquarters, everything was normal, except for Sanemi who was closely watched to prevent him from causing harm to Kanny. He was kept away from her at meetings and would never go on a mission with her. Furthermore, when he was injured, a doctor would treat him so he wouldn't have to go to the butterfly estate for fear he might harm Kanny. But getting back to normal, Giyuu was on a mission with his wives to kill a demon, which they easily accomplished since the demons didn't move much and that worried them because it wasn't normal. But on their way to headquarters, a demon appeared, but what put them on guard was the marking on its two crossed out eyes that said X Crescent 5, which was an ancient moon. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was that this demon was well known to Giyuu. That demon was in the final selection. He was one of the causes of Sabito's death, as that demon caused him a lot of harm. However, he remembered something else. That demon devoured his sister, which made his anger grow. Demon? Oh, what a great surprise, if it isn't the brat who managed to live twice over me, he said laughing very madly. Ignore the helmet and imagine it has an X over its eyes. Giyuu? Damn it, he said angrily, and the sisters saw Giyuu trembling slightly. Demon? Oh, you're scared, that's no surprise, you couldn't do anything when I was a child, he said laughing, and the sisters understood that this was a personal matter between Giyuu and that demon. Then the battle began. The demon with his swords was going to make a cut that was blocked by Giyuu, who began to breathe. Giyuu. Water breathing, third form. Dance of the currents. He weighed down and then swung his sword to simulate the currents of water, which the demon watched with amusement. Demon. Well, so you know how to fight, but let's see what you can do. 10 swords, the demon said, causing his 2 swords to become 10 that he controlled and went after Giyuu. Giyuu tried to block the demon's attacks, but the attacks were too strong and he found it difficult. Demon. Ah, interesting. Let's see what else you can do. 100 kunes, he said, transforming the swords into 100 kunai that he again controlled. Giyuu. Calm down, he said normally so he could block the attacks. Demon. Oh, but you're the water pillar, if I kill you he'll turn me into one more of those 12, he said, going for Giyuu again with his 2 swords. Giyuu. 10th form. Dragon of change, he said, signaling the dragon accompanying him to attack. Demon. Let's have some fun, how about I kill you just like I killed your sister? He said, smiling maniacally. Annie. Are you scaring him? She said, worried about Giyuu. Shinobu. What do we do? She said worriedly. Demon. Or what if I break your bones just like I did to the boy? He said, laughing even more. Giyuu. Shut up already. He said angrily as he attacked the demon again, who was surprised by something. Giyuu's katana was red, a crimson red, but that wasn't all. Unbeknownst to him, Giyuu could see the demon as transparent, which surprised him. But he saw that it was somewhat slower and he took advantage of it and with a quick movement cut off the head of the demon who didn't know what to do. Giyuu. What was that? He said to himself. Then the callous fainted while the sisters went to help him, but they were worried that the kanata was normal and no longer that tone. Shinobu Kani. What was that color? They said, surprised. They didn't know what to say, but they decided to go to headquarters to report what happened and how Giyuu managed to defeat the former crescent moon. Back at headquarters they reported everything and the boss was surprised by what they said, but he asked worriedly if he had awakened a mark, which they denied, and the boss was relieved that one of his children had not awakened that curse. Then they took him to the farm to heal him. Chapter 25. A week had passed since that mission in which Giyuu was already healed and it was time for him to return to work alongside his 2 wives. It should be noted that Giyuu spent that time of rest with his children since he did not spend much time with them, so he took advantage of that time to be with them. But now he was walking on a mission with Shinobu and Kani to a place he wasn't going to like arriving at, the village where he lived with his beloved sister Tsutako, and he was nervous because when he mentioned the subject of his sister dying from a demon, they called him crazy and were going to send him to other relatives, but he ran away from that village. For that reason he was nervous because he didn't know how others would react to his presence. Upon arriving at the village, the first thing they received were looks of disgust, but not for the Kochou sisters, but for Giyuu, and some people began to whisper. X. Look, it's Giyuu, the crazy one, said one man whispering to another. X. Look, my child, don't go near him, he's not a good influence, said a lady to a child who was looking at Giyuu. The sisters noticed this and didn't understand what was happening. They looked at Giyuu and noticed that he was serious, but had a sad expression. They didn't know why people were talking about him like that. When they got a little way away from the village, they decided to ask him what was happening. Annie. Giyuu-kun, why were they saying that to you? She said worriedly, looking at her husband. Shinobu. Yes, Giyuu-kun, why were you doing that? She said, equally worried. Giyuu calmed down a little after hearing what they said and then said. Giyuu. They're like this because of me. Ever since my sister died, they've been looking at me like this because of different theories, he said sadly, and the sisters were surprised. Annie. What theories? She said, sounding a little scared. Giyuu. One is that I went crazy and killed my sister, but it was actually a demon, and another is that since she died she caused me to go crazy, that's why the people in the village look at me like that, he said sadly, and the sisters couldn't believe what happened to Giyuu. Shinobu. Don't worry, we'll support you, we'll never believe that, she said, then hugged Giyuu as did Kani. After that they decided to go see what was happening in the village, but on the way they met Takeo, Tsutako's ex-fiancé, who when he saw Giyuu, quickly went after him and tried to hit him, but was easily stopped by Giyuu. Takeo. You bucking murderer, why did you kill her? He said, tears streaming from his eyes as he tried to free his fist. Giyuu. I am not a murderer, he said seriously, looking at Takeo. Takeo. What do you mean no, you're a murderer, you killed my fiancé, and on top of that she was your sister, he said very angrily while with his other fist, he tried to give another blow, but was stopped by Giyuu again. After that scene, Giyuu, along with Shinobu and Kani, left to wait for the night in which the demon appeared. The demon initially had the appearance of a normal priest, but suddenly he grew horns, and his skin was very blue and dark. They decided to go after the demon, but they saw him go to a church in the village where there was no one but Takeo. Upon arriving at the church, they hid. Giyuu wanted to be the bait for the demon, something the sisters didn't want, but he didn't listen to them and continued with the plan. But Takeo was there too, and without wasting any time he went after him to, according to him, avenge Tsutako for what Giyuu did to her, but just then the demon appeared and Giyuu had to grab Takeo so that he would not get hurt. Demon? Oh, if it isn't Giyuu Tomioka, the brother of the girl he was going to marry, he said, pointing at Takeo. Takeo? Who are you? He said, surprised, looking at the demon. Demon? Oh, but I'm the priest you hired for Tsutako's wedding day. What a shame another demon killed her, he said, smiling maniacally. Takeo? What? He said, somewhat frightened. Giyuu? So you were planning to kill Nisan, he said seriously. Demon? Of course I did, I had planned to kill her along with Takeo, since the wedding was going to be at night and they along with the guests were going to be my meal, but Otto appeared and ruined my plans, he said angrily. Giyuu? You're a damn bastard, he said angrily as he went after him, trying to cut his throat. But the demon barely managed to dodge it, but Kani and Shinobu attacked him from a hidden position and easily cut off the demon's head. After that, Takeo asked them all about demons, and Giyuu explained that a demon killed his sister and that's why he escaped. After that, Takeo apologized to Giyuu, and then the three hunters decided to retreat to the hunter headquarters. Chapter 26. Kani, Shinobu and Giyuu had returned to the hunter headquarters, and when they arrived at the master's estate, they gave the report of what happened. The missions were becoming less complicated since there were fewer demons and only the moons remained to be killed. Although that worried them, the moons were the strongest and Muzan was still left, but they no longer cared about it as they went to the butterfly estate. When they arrived, before entering they managed to hear the screams of their children. They ran to see what was happening, thinking that something had happened to them, but what they saw brought drops of sweat to their eyes and made their veins bulge. Ichi and Tsutako were playing with Inosuke's mask, while Tanjiro and Zenitsu were holding him. The children were scared of Inosuke, while Aoi and Kanao tried to calm them down, but strange auras filled the air. Everyone turned around in fright to see the source of the aura and saw Giyuu, Shinobu and Kani angry with Inosuke for scaring their children. The boys' pride fell and fear took over. But luckily for them, Tanjiro, Inosuke and Zenitsu had already completed their training. They also had to go on a mission with Kaijuro Ringoku, the flame pillar, along with Giyuu, since the master had a bad feeling about him. But even more luck came when the children calmed down and went to hug their parents. But getting back to normal, we'll focus on Giyuu and the Kamaboko squad who were heading to the train station to meet Ringoku. When they arrived they saw the train. It should be said that the three boys were surprised to see the train for the first time, but Giyuu felt a drop of sweat appear on his face when he saw how two of them were saying nonsensical things. The only one with common sense was Zenitsu, who, although Giyuu didn't like him, seemed to appreciate that he acted normally in front of the train. Then they saw the train leaving and jumped on board, then they were going from car to car until they heard something. Kaijuro. Yumai, Kaijuro's energetic voice boomed as he ate. Giyuu found it annoying that he was always shouting for food and the other three were watching him. Then they sat down to wait for the ticket seller to check those items, but Giyuu noticed something strange, and that was that he felt the presence of a demon. He was suspicious, so he gave him his ticket and with a small piece of paper, he took the ticket and left it next to his seat and suddenly he saw the four hunters fall asleep in their seats. He didn't understand what was happening. Suddenly all the passengers were asleep and he quickly focused on seeing if there was a demonic presence and he noticed it. The whole train was inside the demon the whole time and didn't know where he was. He concentrated as much as he could and noticed a presence on the ceiling, but he couldn't go there because suddenly the train was slowly transforming. Without wasting any time, Giyuu began to use all of his strength to protect his companions and the passengers of the train, but he didn't know how to help everyone as he knew that he would gradually become exhausted. The while passed and Giyuu was almost exhausted, but luckily Inosuke appeared and was cutting the tentacles, while Nezuko and Zenitsu helped, and luckily Ringoku was helping now that he was awake. He sensed Tanjiro's presence fighting the demon and, disregarding his exhaustion, went to help. He saw Tanjiro cut off the demon's head, but the presence remained. He saw the head move to the front of the train as a tower of flesh and eyes appeared, and eyes were appearing, trying to see Tanjiro. But Giyuu stood in the way, closing his eyes, and managed to avoid being affected by the technique. Giyuu. Tanjiro, don't look into the eyes, or you'll fall into a dream. Try to be guided by your instincts, he said seriously as he began to cut some eyes. Without wasting any time, Tanjiro also went to cut the eyes while jumping to the top of the tower and saw where the demon was. Giyuu cleared the path by cutting off the demon's eyes as he fell, using great speed, ensuring that Tanjiro did not see any eyes and managing to cut off the demon's head. The train had derailed while they helped the passengers as best they could. The only ones who came out almost unscathed were Kaijuro, Giyuu and Tanjiro, but the latter was injured and unable to move. Everyone was resting, but suddenly a large curtain of smoke appeared and they saw something happen in that area. In front of them was Akaza, the upper moon 3, looking at them seriously, and suddenly the moon went to attack Tanjiro, but Giyuu along with Kaijuro were alert and cut off one of his arms, along with almost a leg. Akaza. Well, 2 pillars, this will be interesting, he said smiling as he moved away and regenerated instantly. The 2 pillars were serious. Giyuu couldn't do much since he had used up a lot of energy, but he got up. Giyuu. Rengoku-san, I'll take care of the defense, while you take care of trying to cut off his head, he said seriously, looking at him and nodding. The battle was about to begin, 2 pillars, one wounded and the other normal, and the upper moon 3 undoubtedly an almost equal battle. Chapter 27. Giyuu was now looking at the upper moon 3, which was far away from him and Rengoku. He didn't know how he was going to help Rengoku, since he had barely been able to handle the upper moon 2 because it caught him by surprise, and he was able to take on the former upper moon 6, but this was the third one, it wasn't normal, since he knew that Dauma had been overconfident that day. Akaza. It's a very good one, 2 pillars, that's good, he said, without wasting any time, he stepped onto the ground. Akaza. Technique deployment. Compass needle, he said as what appeared on the ground was a kind of snowflake with numbers on its tips. The 2 pillars went on alert and positioned themselves to attack, but Akaza was the first to attack at great speed to land a blow on Kaijuro's face, but Giyuu acted quickly and cut Akaza's arm with an upward slash. Kaijuro saw his opportunity and went straight for the head to cut his neck, but Akaza put up his other arm with great pressure that managed to stop Kaijuro's attack, which only managed to make a small wound on Akaza's arm. Akaza. Good plan to kill a common demon, but you're facing a superior loon, idiots, he said, moving away from them and beginning to attack. Akaza. Technique deployment. Chaos style, he said, throwing punches in the air that created shockwaves that went through both pillars, who didn't understand at first, but Giyuu saw how Kaijuro had his sword somewhat behind him as if he had been hit, and there he understood, and without wasting time began to defend. Giyuu. Water breathing, 6 form. Winding whirlpool, he said, twisting his body from the bottom up and spinning, generating a whirlpool that defended them from Akaza's shockwaves. While Kaijuro noticed Akaza running towards them to kill Giyuu, he acted quickly. Kaijuro. Flame breathing, 5th form. Fire tiger, he said as he went towards Akaza and created vortices that formed a tiger that greatly damaged Akaza, who let out a smile. Akaza. He definitely has to turn into a demon, he said to go against Kaijuro. Akaza began to strike, which Kaijuro avoided with his sword, as they were so focused that Akaza did not notice how Giyuu had entered the transparent world, rendering Akaza's needle useless. Giyuu. Water breathing, 5th form. Rain after drought, he thought to get behind Akaza at high speed and try to cut his neck, but Akaza instinctively blocked with his arm. Akaza. What? I didn't notice his presence, there was no way he was from my needle, he thought in surprise, but he saw something that scared him, Giyuu's sword turned crimson red. Akaza. What? How did he get that color, but who is he? He thought while looking and feeling afraid, yes, afraid. Akaza was afraid because behind Giyuu he saw something. A man with long, almost reddish hair, wide eyes, a mark on his forehead, a red sword, and a red yukata. He didn't know why, but he was afraid. The only thing that made this man look different from Giyuu was the mark, but he sensed the danger and decided to run away, not wanting to die. But the 2 pillars didn't make it easy for him, using their fastest stances to catch him. Kaijuro. Flame breathing, 9th form. Purgatory, he said, then charged at great speed towards Akaza, enveloped in a fire dragon. Giyuu. Water breathing, 9th form. Chaotic splash, he said, disappearing, and on the ground in a straight direction, appeared what would be small puddles of water that went directly to Akaza. Akaza. Damned, technique deployment. Destructive style, he said as he delivered a powerful blow with both arms that was going to collide with the attacks of both pillars. Giyuu. I won't allow it, water breathing, 11th form. Calm, he said to stand in front of Akaza and with great speed cut off Akaza's arms, who was surprised and a cut from Kaijuro was going for his neck, but he would use his last resort with his already regenerated arms. Akaza. Technique display, final style. Chaotic blue metal radiance, he said, striking in all directions that the 2 pillars barely managed to avoid, and the sun was rising. Thus Akaza managed to escape, causing both pillars to become frustrated, but they had to attend to their injuries, since the shock waves left them with internal damage that was not so easily seen on the outside. Then Kakushins arrived who were tending to Kaijuro along with the other hunters, but Kani and Shinobu were helping their Giyuu-kun to survive. Chapter 28. Giyuu was now looking at the upper moon 3, which was far away from him and Rengoku. He didn't know how he was going to help Rengoku since he had barely been able to handle the Upper Moon 2 because it caught him by surprise and he was able to take on the former Upper Moon 6, but this was the third one. It wasn't normal since he knew that Dauma had been overconfident that day. Bakaza. It's a very good one, 2 pillars, that's good, he said. Without wasting any time, he stepped onto the ground. Bakaza. Technique deployment. Compass needle, he said as what appeared on the ground was a kind of snowflake with numbers on its tips. The 2 pillars went on alert and positioned themselves to attack, but Akaza was the first to attack at great speed to land a blow on Kaijuro's face, but Giyuu acted quickly and cut Akaza's arm with an upward slash. Kaijuro saw his opportunity and went straight for the head to cut his neck, but Akaza put up his other arm with great pressure that managed to stop Kaijuro's attack, which only managed to make a small wound on Akaza's arm. Akaza. Good plan to kill a common demon, but you're facing a superior loon, idiots, he said, moving away from them and beginning to attack. Bakaza. Technique deployment. Chaos style, he said, throwing punches in the air that created shockwaves that went through both pillars, who didn't understand at first, but Giyuu saw how Kaijuro had his sword somewhat behind him as if he had been hit, and there he understood, and without wasting time began to defend. Giyuu. Water breathing, 6 form. Winding whirlpool, he said, twisting his body from the bottom up and spinning, generating a whirlpool that defended them from Akaza's shockwaves. While Kaijuro noticed Akaza running towards them to kill Giyuu, he acted quickly. Kaijuro. Flame breathing, 5th form. Fire tiger, he said as he went towards Akaza and created vortices that formed a tiger that greatly damaged Akaza, who let out a smile. Akaza. He definitely has to turn into a demon, he said to go against Kaijuro. Akaza began to strike, which Kaijuro avoided with his sword as they were so focused that Akaza did not notice how Giyuu had entered the transparent world, rendering Akaza's needle useless. Giyuu. Water breathing, 5th form. Rain after drought, he thought to get behind Akaza at high speed and try to cut his neck, but Akaza instinctively blocked with his arm. Akaza. What? I didn't notice his presence, there was no way he was from my needle, he thought in surprise, but he saw something that scared him. Giyuu's sword turned crimson red. Akaza. What? How did he get that color, but who is he? He thought while looking and feeling afraid, yes, afraid. Akaza was afraid because behind Giyuu he saw something. A man with long, almost reddish hair, wide eyes, a mark on his forehead, a red sword, and a red yukata. He didn't know why, but he was afraid. The only thing that made this man look different from Giyuu was the mark, but he sensed the danger and decided to run away, not wanting to die. But the 2 pillars didn't make it easy for him, using their fastest stances to catch him. Kaijuro. Flame breathing, 9th form. Purgatory, he said, then charged at great speed towards Akaza, enveloped in a fire dragon. Giyuu. Water breathing, 9th form. Chaotic splash, he said, disappearing, and on the ground in a straight direction, appeared what would be small puddles of water that went directly to Akaza. Akaza. Damned, technique deployment. Destructive style, he said as he delivered a powerful blow with both arms that was going to collide with the attacks of both pillars. Giyuu. I won't allow it, water breathing, 11th form. Calm, he said to stand in front of Akaza and with great speed cut off Akaza's arms, who was surprised and a cut from Kaijuro was going for his neck, but he would use his last resort with his already regenerated arms. Akaza. Technique display, final style. Chaotic blue metal radiance, he said, striking in all directions that the 2 pillars barely managed to avoid, and the sun was rising. Thus Akaza managed to escape, causing both pillars to become frustrated, but they had to attend to their injuries, since the shock waves left them with internal damage that was not so easily seen on the outside. Then Kakushins arrived who were tending to Kaijuro along with the other hunters, but Kani and Shinobu were helping their Giyuu-kun to survive. Chapter 29. Note. As I said, I have to finish this story, I'm sorry. A few months had passed, during which many things had happened, such as the time they defeated Upper Moon 6. For that mission, the Pillars of Sound and Water went to the Red Light District. Of course, Giyuu's wives didn't want him to go to that disgusting place, in their words, but he managed to convince them that it was necessary to save innocent lives there. Luckily for everyone, the 2 pillars managed to escape alive, thanks to the help of Kamado and his friends, as well as Nezuko. She was key to their victory, as she neutralized the poison that Giyuu and Yuzi had acquired from fighting Gyutaro, the Upper Moon 6, who shared that position with her sister Daki, who held the Lower Moon position, but was considered the Upper Moon. Dear Yuzui did not lose his hand and is still in the organization, also that Mitsuri Kanroji and Michiro Takedo managed to defeat Upper Moon 5 and Upper Moon 4. Only the other Upper Moons were missing, which they knew would be harder to defeat. They were the first 2 Upper Moons. It was clear that they were not going to be able to defeat those moons alone. Several had to go. The 3rd Upper Moon was now the 2nd Upper Moon, and there was no signal from the first one. They were currently in a meeting with the boss, who was looking somewhat worried at his children, especially the 3-year-old couple. Boss. Well, according to your information, Michiro, you say there's a possibility of awakening the hunter's mark, but there are reports that the mark will kill the bearer at 25 years old, he said worriedly. Michiro. Oyakata-sama, I know it's risky, but it would help against the moons and Muzan. There are only 2 left and the Demon King. Everything will be alright, we have to make sacrifices, he said seriously. The boss sighed at that, he didn't want to risk his children, and even less the couple of 3, so he spoke. Patron. I understand, training is going to be done to awaken the hunter's mark, but you Giyuu Tomioka, I want you to explain something that's happening. According to reports your sword turned red, and you increased your abilities, he said seriously looking at the water pillar and the others as well. Giyuu. Oyakata-sama, I can't report much, what I can say is that I simply gripped my sword very tightly and it turned red, and regarding the other thing, I would say there is something to meditation. I managed to enter a state where I saw demons as transparent, but for that I needed to be calm, not stressed, I just concentrated on being calm, hiding my intentions to kill, he said, while everyone reflected on the information from the pillar. Jaime. Regarding the information about the red sword, I can't say much, but the state Giyuu is talking about is the state of the transparent world, in which you can see inside the person you're facing, he said seriously, surprising the others. Boss. Then we have to do training, especially if someone who has a family can retire, I won't force my sons to fight, he said looking at the pillars. Everyone had their answers, except Kani and Shinobu. They didn't want to go because their children would be left alone if they went to fight, and they also didn't want Giyuu there because he was their father and the one they loved. Boss. Kani, Shinobu, if you don't want to go for the sake of your children, that's fine, we can't force you, he said calmly. Kani. But if we don't go, guy, she didn't finish speaking. Giyuu. I'll be fine, you will be needed for the children, he said seriously, looking at his 2 wives who were hesitant, but Shinobu knew that he would not let them go. Shinobu. We won't go to the fight, Oyakata-sama. We're going to stay and take care of things. When the fight is over, we'll heal the wounded so that not so many lives are lost, she said sadly about the possibility of Giyuu dying, and Kani didn't respond because she understood. Boss. Well then, I'll tell the other hunters that they must train with you, so this meeting is over. After the meeting, many hunters began arriving at the headquarters to train with the pillars. The flower and insect pillars were no longer on duty, but they did heal the others after training, although something angered them. Some female hunters were talking about Giyuu. Huntress 1. Did you see the water pillar? He's very handsome, she said while blushing. Huntress 2. Yes, do you think that if we wipe out the demons I'll have a chance to be your wife? She said dreamily. Huntress 3. No, I'll be the one who stays with him, she said while smiling. Those things angered Kani and Shinobu, who were furious about it. They weren't going to let anyone take their Giyuu-kun away from them. Kani. Ara, I'm sorry, but as far as I know, the water pillar is married, she said, forcing a smile. The huntresses asked, thinking they could outdo the wife, but they were surprised. Shinobu. Giyuu-kun is married to me and my sister, in fact we already have children, she said, smiling superiorly at the demon slayers who were disheartened. Chapter 30. The training of the pillars had already taken place, all the hunters had managed to reach a good level for the fight, but we will concentrate on the pair. Kani. Giyuu-kun, please don't go, she said with tears in her eyes. Giyuu. Kani, we already talked about this. It's necessary. I want you to live in a world where you and the children can live in peace, he said, sounding somewhat sad. Shinobu. Please don't go, if you die we won't be able to have peace, she said sadly. Giyuu. I don't want to leave you either, but if there's a chance I'll come back, I'll take it. But if I don't make it, I don't want you to cry. I'll watch over you from heaven, and if possible, I hope you find love again with someone else. He said as he left, leaving both sisters crying as they watched their husband go to the battlefield. They didn't want to let him go. They wanted to support him, but they knew that if they did, they too could die and leave the children alone. Pani Shinobu. You'd better come back alive, they said as they recovered. In the battle, the pillars had been transported to a kind of labyrinth made up of blocks of estates, each pillar was separated, and there was a large number of demons which had the level of lower moons. Everyone knew it was to weaken them, so they simply killed them without having to expend so much energy to face the 2 superiors, but they were in for a surprise. Mitsuri and Aguro were sent to a room where, surprisingly, Nakam, the upper moon 4, was present. In another scene, Zenitsu and Yuzui were looking at the upper moon, which was Zenitsu's former training partner, Kagaku. In another room were Michiro, Genya, Sanemi and Jaime before upper moon 1, and finally in another room were Rengoku, Giyuu and Tanjiro, before upper moon 2 Akaza. Hanao and Inosuke were there as backup, helping against the lesser demons, so they wouldn't cause any more problems for the pillars. All the fights are the same as in the manga, but I'll put this. In the fight against Kagaku, who ascended to the upper moon 5, the two boys were worried because they were somewhat injured. Kagaku. Ha 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 ha, just die, humans can't defeat demons, he said, laughing arrogantly. Uzui. I don't intend to give up, I will return, I don't care what happens, I intend to return for my wives, I intend to give them the world of peace they wanted, he said, as in a swift movement he went for Kagaku, cutting off his arms, and Zenit used his stance. Zenitsu. Lightning breathing, 7th form. God of thunder in flames, he said, and at great speed, a lightning dragon beside him cut off Kagaku's head. In the fight against Kakishibo. Kakishibo. There's no point in fighting me, I'm superior, and you Michiro Takedo except being a demon, you are my descendant, he said looking at Michiro. Michiro. Never, he said while still attacking, his hand was almost cut off, but he managed to avoid it with difficulty, but he dropped a photo. Michiro saw the photo and smiled, feeling motivated. Michiro. I plan to do it for her, for Nezuko, for the girl I love, he said, attacking again with his mark, the world transparent, and his sword was red. Kakishibo was frightened by this because Jayame had him trapped with his chains, and Tsunemi was holding him back. Genyu was already dead and he didn't care about dying. Michiro managed to cut off his head, but Tsunemi was injured and died instantly. Before dying he hugged his brother's body. In the fight against Akaza. Akaza. They are very good at fighting, even if they are demons, we can fight for eternity, especially you, water pillar, he said very excitedly. Giyuu. Never, I have one goal, to return to them, I intend to return to them and my children, no matter what, he said as he awakened his mark and activated the transparent world. Upon hearing that, Akaza remembered everything and self-destructed. Everything else happened like the original story with Tanjiro being demons, the same ones who survived, only Giyuu, Michiro and Uzui survived. The rest died. Currently, Giyuu is resting on a stretcher as the battle left him exhausted and the two girls from the butterfly estate studied the pillars to help them with the hunter mark. They managed to do this because a flower helped them a lot. That was definitely something that pleased everyone. Annie. Thank Buddha that you are alive, she said hugging Giyuu. Shinobu. Idiot, don't worry us again, she said while hugging him. Giyuu. Calm down now, he said somewhat painfully. Michiro and Nezuko were in a relationship, Tanjiro and Kanao too, surprisingly Aoi and Inosuke as well, and Zenitsu, well, he was with a girl named Yae, who agreed to have children with him. It was all a great deal of happiness without demons. End. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching, if you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day, bye.